It all starts in the year 2020-something, when a colossal dungeon suddenly appeared right in the heart of Tokyo. Deep within that place, there was a massive labyrinth crawling with bizarre monsters. But for anyone brave enough to venture down there, they could find riches and resources that simply didn't exist anywhere else on Earth. Driven by the dream of becoming millionaires, humanity decided to take on the challenge and enter the dungeon. But there was one important catch: the deeper the adventurers went for treasure, the more dangerous and deadly the threats became. Exploring that place basically meant shaking hands with the Grim Reaper. Because of that, many of the people who went in never made it back to the surface. In the middle of all this, an adventurer freezes in shock when he comes face to face with a gigantic beast and figures it's game over for him. However, a powerful beam of light tears through the air and hits the creature dead on. The impact rips a chunk off the monster, making the guys look up in total surprise, wondering where the attack came from. That shot was all it took to secure a very valuable, glowing metal component. The one who fired it was Soma, wielding a giant ray gun, and he realizes the firepower was well worth the massive energy drain. The monstrous beast drops to the ground right after, defeated without even a chance to fight back. He then casually makes his way down to the group, while the guys, relieved, thank him and say that with his help, they could clear out the rest of the floor. However, our main character MC shuts down the offer on the spot, leaving the adventurers confused. The guys are floored and ask if this is some kind of joke. He simply explains that he only came down to harvest materials from the boss, because he needs to make some cash for his little sister. Completely desperate, the team leader begs him for help. Seeing new monsters approaching, the kid repeats that he's not getting involved in a problem that doesn't pay in gold coins. But he does pause for a moment on his way out. At that, the adventurer quickly offers him all the money he has on hand. With that, the kid pulls out his weapon and says he's always willing to talk when business is on the table. Holding an impressive flaming sword, he's already asking how much the guy is willing to pay for the gear. A few months earlier, he was focused on his work while his sister complained that he never got tired of doing the same thing all day. This all happened because, for some bizarre reason, the labyrinth that appeared in the city was a carbon copy of the country's most popular online game. Consequently, veteran players discovered they could use all their in-game skills inside the dungeon. Since weapons from the outside world didn't work in there, these players gained an insane advantage and became obsessed with hunting monsters for treasure. However, Soma had a very different goal than everyone else. Being an artisan class, he summons his cube and gets ready to put in some work. Completely ignoring the exploration craze, the kid spent his days focused solely on crafting new items in his workshop. His class was the only one dedicated to production, considered by other players to be the absolute worst and having a terrible reputation. But for our MC, all the trash talk from the community didn't bother him one bit. He continued to shape the magical materials with total dedication. Combat and exploration were on the back burner, as his true playstyle was to live and breathe crafting to become the Grand Master of creation. Until one day, while admiring a new sword, he gets a call from his sister. The girl answers, totally freaking out, thanking him for picking up and begging for his help. Startled by the tone of her voice, he immediately asks what's going on. He remembers that she had always been super responsible and took great care of things at home. On top of that, she was a far more skilled adventurer than he'd ever be and had never asked for help like that before. Knowing the situation had to be serious to make her scream in panic, he runs like a madman through the dark dungeon corridors. The kid pushes forward, shouting her name, trying to find any sign of her along the way. Guided by the system's tracker, he realizes her location is coming from that floor and demands an answer. Just then, he hears his sister's weak voice call his name and turns around, relieved. But instead of the girl he knew, he finds a small, crying blue fairy, saying she thought she'd turned into a monster. In total disbelief at the bizarre scene in front of him, the kid just freezes on the spot. The silence of the place is shattered when he lets out a massive scream, unable to believe what he's seeing. Trying to make sense of it, he recaps her story about passing out, while the fairy cries, saying everyone treated her like a freak. The tiny creature continues to sit in his hand, trembling and terrified of her new form. Since the original game never had a monster transformation mechanic, the MC decides to activate his analysis skill. This artisan ability was designed specifically to discover crafting recipes. You just had to use it on an item to reveal how it was made. On top of that, if used on a player with a negative status effect, the skill would instantly show the recipe for the cure. With few options left, he scans his sister, hoping the transformation would be considered just a status problem. Suddenly, the system panel starts glitching out, full of static, making him think it might be beyond fixing. But straining his eyes through the holographic mess, he manages to decipher a single, legible line of text. The message confirmed an unknown curse, stating that the only possible treatment was the legendary Philosopher's Stone. The fairy gets super excited, remembering that this item was the rarest of the rare in the game and would surely cure her transformation. He agrees about the item's potential, but the real problem was that no one had ever found one in the entire labyrinth. Opening the crafting recipe, the kid panics when he sees it requires absurd things like hell dragon's blood and crystal coral. Sitting on the floor, defeated, he concludes it would be impossible to gather everything themselves, leaving them with only one option: buying it from shops. His little sister freezes completely when she sees the total price to buy everything hits the absurd mark of 100 million gold coins. Frustrated, he laments that having the recipe was useless without the materials, feeling like his class really was a piece of junk. The tiny fairy flies up to his face, irritated, yelling that if he weren't an artisan, they wouldn't even know how to fix this situation. Caught off guard by the sudden scolding, the MC just stares at her, speechless. The kid cracks a small smile and thanks his Leal sis for the support as he gently pets her with his finger. Totally renewed, he gets up, all fired up, and announces he's going to give it his all to buy every single ingredient. Holding out his hand to the girl, he makes it clear that she'll have to help out too. Without a second thought, the fairy jumps into her brother's palm, agreeing to the idea right away. However, she quickly gets confused and asks how they're supposed to rake in such an insane amount of cash. Full of confidence, the MC starts walking and assures her they're going to get rich by exploiting the labyrinth's resources. Soon after, the duo arrives at the mining area located on the first floor of the massive dungeon. Looking around, he notices the place is full of newbies who probably just created accounts to try their luck in here. As he summons his creation cube, the fairy floats closer, curious to see what he was cooking up. The kid shows her small mining bombs, explaining that they would sell the extracted ores to build up some starting capital. But their conversation is cut short by a mocking laugh from someone calling the artisan class a joke for losers. A blue-haired mage, flanked by his group, approaches with an arrogant smirk, claiming the MC must be a total rookie. The MC and the fairy just watch the provocation in silence. Finding it hilarious, the mage laughs uncontrollably and says he thought artisans were already extinct. Tired of hearing the same old thing, the kid comments to his sister that nothing has changed since the game and suggests they head back. But the little fairy points her finger in the guise of faces, warning them they've said enough. Seeing the creature flying around freely, the mage scoffs, asking what kind of pet monster that was. Annoyed by the interruption, he raises his staff and suddenly attacks the fairy. The blow comes crashing down toward the tiny creature. Just then, the MC easily blocks the attack using only a tool, leaving his opponent in shock at his physical strength. With a menacing glare, he warns the guy that he can trash talk his class all he wants, but laying a finger on her was a different story. With that, the kid shoves the mage away and tells them to back off because they were busy. Utterly outraged at being treated that way by an artisan, the newbie starts charging up a fire spell. He unleashes the magic with everything he's got, demanding that the MC beg for his life. The attack creates a massive explosion that destroys the ground around them. Laughing at his own destruction, the mage claims that advanced spell was too good for a trash artisan and a weak little monster. However, when the smoke clears, the kid is still standing without a scratch, protected by a water barrier. Not understanding how his flames just vanished, the newbie is completely stunned. Turns out, the block was made by combining a small mining bomb with a simple drinking water recovery item. Holding his glowing cube, the MC explains that this mixture creates a perfect countermeasure against the fire attribute. The kid even adds that the result wasn't half bad for something he just whipped up on the spot. Desperate, the mage yells that it was impossible for a low-level item to nullify his advanced magic. Unable to accept the situation, he announces he's going to expose this little trick and activates his analysis skill. The newbie's system then quickly scans his opponent's information. Reading the holographic screen, he and his friends are left speechless, refusing to believe what they're seeing. The panel displayed level 999, making the mage scream and question who the heck this guy was. Quite calmly, the kid replies that he's just your average artisan. Shaking from head to toe, his opponent is still trying to process that absurd number. He yells that it was the game's level cap and no artisan could ever reach it, while the MC reminds him that he's already felt its power. A level 9 water bomb appears on the screen, with the kid explaining that crafted items scale in power along with the player's level. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the mage's friends panic and ask if they're really going to lose to an item crafter. His pride wounded, the group's leader gets angry and asks if they think he's going to lose. Refusing to accept such a defeat, the newbie summons a gigantic magic circle on the ground. He slams his hands down with all his might and casts the earth-shattering spell. Enormous pillars of rock begin to erupt all around the MC. To avoid being crushed, the kid takes a huge leap and dodges the destruction. A moment later, he lands safely on the edge of a cliff, thinking he has the upper hand. The mage lets out a bizarre laugh and brags about having mastered the advanced magics of the 4 main elements. Just then, the ground where the magic hit opens up into a dark pit, as the newbie demands the artisan beg for mercy. However, a colossal shadow begins to rise from the crater right behind the group. The MC calls the guy an idiot, warning him that his spell just blew a hole straight to the floor below. A giant, monstrous dragon emerges roaring, and the kid grumbles that now they have a serious problem to deal with. Before anyone can react, the beast starts concentrating a massive amount of energy in its mouth. The monster fires a devastating blast of fire toward the adventurers. Staring his end right in the face, the mage screams in complete terror. The explosion sweeps across the entire area, tossing the group of newbies away like they were nothing. Meanwhile, the MC stands firm against the impact of the flames, once again activating his water barrier. Desperate, the fairy asks what they're going to do, since she couldn't fight in her weakened state. Keeping his cool, the kid asks his sister to try using a scout ability. The monster fires another blast as the MC runs, saying he just needs support and tells her to find its weak spot. With agility, he slides across the ground, dodging the fiery attack. Following his request, the little one raises her hands and immediately activates her detection skill. The system scans the entire body of the bluish creature, as giant monsters always have a hidden weakness. The targeting reticle locks right onto the base of the dragon's tail, and the girl immediately tells him where to focus. The MC confirms the information and charges in, preparing his attack. He lands a direct hit on the target, causing a huge impact. Watching from a distance, the newbies think it was useless, since the beast didn't seem to have taken any damage. But the kid triumphantly shows off a crystal, revealing that his only goal was to get the item dropped by hitting the weak spot. Activating his cube again, he combines a pickaxe with ore to create a spear, and merges his small bombs to make a big one. Adding that to the rare material he just got from the monster, he activates his triple craft technique. An absurd flash of light illuminates the entire cavern during the forging process. When the light fades, he appears holding a giant, brutal weapon made from the dragon's scales. Without wasting a second, he charges toward the monster at high speed. The MC hits the creature right in the chest with the tip of the weapon. With a cold look, the kid announces that their fight ends here. The weapon's mechanism activates, ejecting a giant ammunition capsule into the air. A colossal internal explosion rips through the dragon's body, destroying the beast from the inside out. He lands calmly on the ground with his new weapon. As the monster dissolves into particles of light, the fairy flies around him celebrating the victory, leaving the group of newbies up above completely stunned. Just then, a weak voice from the edge of the pit gets their attention. It was the group leader, hanging on and asking for help, but the kid tells him to use that magic he was so proud of to get himself up. Whimpering, the mage confesses he used up all his energy on the last attack. The MC agrees to help, but makes it clear that because of all the trouble, the rescue wouldn't be free. He demands the guy first apologize to his sister, and the newbie immediately starts screaming and begging for forgiveness. On top of that, the kid mentions he has his own bills to pay, and that letting him perish there wouldn't turn a profit. With his mercenary attitude, he charges the guy for every last gold coin he had in his pocket. Soon after, the newbies run off crying, completely broke, while the artisan thanks them for their business, shaking a bag of money. Sitting on the ground exhausted, the little fairy approaches, very worried, and asks what happened. The kid mentions he's hit his physical limit, as artisans weren't built to fight that insane number of monsters in the labyrinth. Just then, the two newbie adventurers from the earlier commotion show up, impressed, confessing they watched the entire battle hidden from a distance. Without any ceremony, one of the guys focuses on the giant weapon in the MC's hands and asks if he'd be willing to sell the equipment. The guy is so desperate for the item that he immediately offers 200,000 gold coins and raises the bid to 300,000 in the blink of an eye. Shocked by the absurd amount, the kid asks if the weapon is really worth that much. The fairy confirms the advantage of using something so strong to hunt monsters. The newbie eagerly agrees, explaining that the stats on that explosive spear far surpassed any normal gear found on the ground. Right after, his partner reminds them that the situation here was very different from the original game, as now their own lives were on the line. Hearing that, the artisan quickly realizes that people inside preferred to camp out on safer floors, killing weak monsters. He perfectly understands the logic, since anyone with a brain would spend a mountain of money to avoid the risk of hunting for rare items. Extremely focused on the easy cash, the MC accepts the offer on the spot and hands over the brutal weapon to its new owners. But even after making a killing from the sale and the rescue fee, the system panel shows they still need almost 100 million for their goal. Now walking through the bustling city streets on the surface, the young man celebrates the fact they managed to score 2 big, unexpected paydays. Suddenly, he focuses his gaze on the blue fairy's face and excitedly announces that he just had a genius idea for their problem. The girl gets a massive shock when she hears her brother suggest they give up on making money by fighting in the dungeon altogether. Shaking nervously, Shika remembers the danger and says it's impossible for the two of them to clear the deeper floors on their own. However, the fairy quickly understands where the conversation is going and becomes very thoughtful as she flies around her partner. Holding a newly forged shining sword, the kid confidently reinforces that they still have his unique artisan skill on their side. Understanding the brilliant plan perfectly, his little sister is amazed by the possibilities. Walking through the streets, the kid concludes that now there's a real, desperate demand. They just need to convince others to buy his items. He makes it very clear that there's no point in trying to sell cheap junk to newbies. The big move is to mix simple materials and charge a fortune. The little one completely agrees with the quick profit strategy but soon asks if they could find a convenient recipe that fast. Stopping in front of a gigantic, super luxurious building, the artisan assures her that the perfect place to solve that was right in front of them. The grand double doors of the imposing main hall begin to open slowly. Admiring the extravagant environment, the MC announces that this is the place where the most gold changes hands in the entire labyrinth. An impressive golden glare hits the duo's faces as soon as they enter the main corridor. They finally arrive at the legendary auction, an exclusive event focused on selling the most powerful artifacts to millionaire explorers. The event is already on fire, with the audience shouting aggressive bids of 50, 60, and even 70,000 coins for magic stones. Absolutely amazed by the cash flying around the hall, Shika praises the place while the young man reinforces the reputation of this grand market. Up on the illuminated stage, the auctioneer excitedly slams his gavel, finalizing the sale of a pair of mystic earrings for the bargain price of 90,000 coins. With a very confident posture observing the crowd, the kid tells the fairy to pay attention, because the real fun was about to begin. The announcer wastes no time and introduces a black shield with a demonic face, opening the bids at an initial mark of 100,000 coins. The audience goes wild almost immediately, driving the price of the equipment up to 450,000 at a frightening speed. Then, a very elegant blonde woman calmly raises her paddle, offering 550,000 all at once. With no competitor crazy enough to top that fortune, the man slams the gavel and hands over the legendary defense to the rich lady. Hiding in the back of the hall with the fairy, Soma focuses his eyes on the piece and decides right then and there that would be their next production target. Watching the woman take the item, the MC explains that the bidding war proved there were desperate customers for that model. The artisan's brilliant idea is to simply mass produce the black shield in his workshop and sell it directly to the rich folks who lost the auction. Already calculating the profits of the operation in his head, the kid doesn't hide his greed and gets very excited about the mountain of money. Analyzing the system's creation panel, the duo discovers they need only 2 very rare materials to start the heavy manufacturing. The floating holograms clearly display the need to use war-grade adamantite, or mixed with the boiling blood of a dragon. The kid recalls with relief that they had already secured the vial of blood when they destroyed that colossal monster, summoned by the newbie mage. To get the valuable stone they were missing, the duo descends to the second floor of the dungeon and begins exploring the dark, brick-lined corridors. Upon spotting 2 adventurers standing in a corner, the MC immediately puts on his salesman hat and asks if they're having mana problems. Very friendly, he shows off a glowing green vial and offers to sell them that energy potion he made with his own hands. But the negotiation quickly gets tense when he charges the absurd price of 1,000 coins for the liquid, leaving the guys furious at the blatant rip-off. Already holding the heavy pouch of money, the kid ignores their anger and states that he saw no problem in making a few bucks off his colleagues. The capitalist strategy works perfectly, as he sells overpriced items to various explorers lost in the dark tunnels. One of the customers finally realizes the inflated price and tries to complain about the extortion, but the artisan swears the value was super fair. Showing a technological amulet in his hand, the MC continues his sales pitch, claiming the equipment avoids all dangerous traps. The crowd's desperation is so great that they start a mini auction right there in the hallway, fiercely competing over who would get the glowing object. In the midst of that profitable chaos, the blue fairy hears a frightening noise coming from down the hall and looks back apprehensively. The little one screams her brother's name in total panic, abruptly snapping the young man out of his financial trance. An entire pack of 3-headed, flaming wolves comes charging like crazy down the corridor, straight toward the group of humans. Seeing their end approaching, drooling fire, the 2 buyers let out a deafening scream and run for their lives without a second thought. Soma joins the desperate race, holding his sister, frustrated that he was so focused on negotiations he lost track of the danger. The demonic beasts don't slow down and continue to advance fiercely against them, closing the distance with every second. Shika nervously asks if it wouldn't be better to face the monsters, but he thinks it's too risky to involve the little one in that crossfire. To make their dramatic escape worse, they end up taking a wrong turn and run smack into a solid brick wall blocking the passage. With the beasts closing in, the kid turns to face them holding a frosty cube with a very ironic look and says the panic was all an act. Using focused energy, the artisan pulls a colossal, bluish hammer from the system, emanating an absurd aura of ice toward the predators. Preparing a brutal overhead swing, he yells that the number of wolves didn't matter at all in such a tight space. The impact hits the ground with extreme violence, releasing a freezing magical wave that devastates the fiery pack in an instant. The damage from the blow was so over the top that it shattered the entire surrounding structure to pieces and made the stone floor give way completely beneath his feet. Plummeting along with the debris into the dark abyss, the MC asks if his partner is okay, and she's grateful they weren't crushed. Stepping firmly onto a new rocky surface, the kid laments the precious time they lost running and hurries the girl to continue their gathering. However, the poor guy's luck had completely run out, as the new floor also immediately collapses from the excess weight of the first impact. Lying pathetically in a pile of rocks under the hole he just made in the ceiling, the poor young man lets out a groan, feeling pain all over his body. Massaging his own head in the dark, he admits he overdid it with the force, and is thankful he's not in the real world, where he'd already be a goner. Completely frustrated with his own tactical blunder, the artisan realizes he just repeated the same disastrous idiocy as the newbie mage. From above, the fairy dives at high speed toward the bottom of the pit, screaming for her brother with a terrified expression. The little one lands on his head, wanting to confirm if the damage was serious, while he praises the existence of the game's blessed health system. Sitting cross-legged in the absolute darkness, the kid tries to see around and decides the top priority now was to get some light. Straight from his magical reserves, a small technological lantern begins to float, releasing a strong, warm golden glow into the environment. Holding the light protectively, the kid adopts a more alert posture and prepares to face whatever was hiding in those shadows. The lantern's light reveals a huge, destroyed underground chamber. Observing the environment, Soma finds it all bizarre and notes that the place has the vibe of ancient civilization ruins. Just then, heavy metallic footsteps begin to echo from the darkness of the corridor. Terrified, the fairy gets her brother's attention, asking him to look ahead. The kid freezes on the spot when he sees what was emerging from the shadows. A giant, damaged machine appears, which he recognizes as a classic raid event monster. He's amazed, thinking they even recreated this type of creature, finding the labyrinth unbelievable. Analyzing its body design, the artisan deduces that it's the Grand Gignal Eve, an extremely tough enemy. Shika desperately asks what they should do now. Very calmly, he asks the little one to wait there for a moment while he goes to take a closer look. Thrilled by the chance for profit, the kid remembers that this boss drops incredible materials. His little sister warns him it's dangerous, but he completely ignores the alert and approaches the machine. Crouching next to the junk pile, he tries to reassure the girl by showing her that the robot is completely turned off. However, the machine's core suddenly lights up with a strong green glow, catching the young man by surprise. The giant robot starts releasing smoke and moving. With that, Soma jumps back and yells for the fairy to run. The robot's hatch bursts open violently, releasing a large cloud of steam into the air. The MC and the fairy stand paralyzed, watching the scene with great tension. Amidst the dense smoke, a humanoid silhouette begins to emerge slowly. A robotic girl full of cables and mechanical joints reveals herself completely intact. Sometime later, the day dawns peacefully in a house on the city's surface. Inside, a broom sweeps up a pile of accumulated dust on the wooden floor. The robotic girl, now dressed as a maid, asks if he doesn't clean the place often. Holding the broom, Eve sighs and states that he is a very troublesome master. The two siblings just stare at the robot working, unable to say a single word. Completely confused by the bizarre situation, the kid wonders how things got to this point. It all happened when the machine's core was revealed back in the underground ruins. The mechanical doll had disconnected from the colossal armor and taken a step forward. Soma remembers that this raid boss was composed of a giant exterior and a human-shaped core. But before any fight could begin, the robot girl simply collapsed to the ground, out of power. Prepared for the worst, the artisan activated his system and began scanning the body of the fallen machine. The holographic panel instantly registered the kid's name as the device's new master. Reading the sudden notification, the duo was completely shocked, not understanding a thing. Back in the present, he explains that the robot lost her enemy memories and became fixated on the idea that he was her owner. Since orders for her to leave didn't work, the kid ended up bringing the machine home. While cleaning the artisan's messy workbench, the maid complains about the disorder. The fairy completely agrees with her criticism, annoying the young man with their little conspiracy. He grumbles at his sister, pointing out that this situation was just as nonsensical as her transformation into a monster. Deciding to monitor Eve, the MC announces they're going back to the labyrinth for materials and tells her to stay and look after the house. The robot just stares at the young man with a blank expression, in silence. Without questioning, the girl bows and wishes him success on his hunt. Now walking through the dark tunnels of the dungeon, the kid remains intrigued by her obsession with cleaning. Flying beside him, the fairy suggests that the character's hidden backstory must have surfaced. Soma remembers the original game's lore, said that these machines were survivors of a highly advanced civilization. Apparently, Eve was a maid who served the princess of that ancient era, and losing her memory brought this personality back. Satisfied with the theory, he decides to put the matter aside and focus on what really mattered now. The artisan states that the main goal at the moment was to gather the items to forge the Black Shield. Suddenly, the duo spots a group of well-armed adventurers standing in the middle of the path. Recognizing the leader, the MC immediately calls out to the paladin named Oliver. The armored knight turns around, quite surprised to find the kid in such a dangerous place. One of the team members asks how they know each other, and the paladin explains that the kid is a weirdo focused on a useless class. Offended by the comment, Soma grumbles that it was very rude to call his work junk. Even while teasing his friend, Oliver warns his team not to underestimate the artisan or try to pick a fight. The girls in the group laugh, commenting that the young man's level would surely wipe the floor with them. Very excited, the team's mage approaches, wanting to know if the two were great friends. At the same time, both the paladin and the kid deny any friendship, leaving the group's ninja impressed by their synchronicity. Changing the subject, the knight asks where the kid's sister was, since they were always together. The MC gets a little awkward at the sudden question. After hearing the whole story, Oliver admits it's hard to believe the girl turned into that little blue monster. The paladin even jokes that it was more likely the artisan had gone crazy and adopted a pet. Cutting the chat short, the knight says he doesn't have time to help, and the MC assures him he wasn't expecting anything from him anyway. Oliver acknowledges that raising 100 million coins to reverse the spell is going to be an absurd amount of work. The knight praises his dedication, remembering that the little fairy wasn't even the kid's blood sister. Oozing confidence, the artisan replies that it's obvious he would do anything for her. Moved by the declaration, his little sister smushes his face in a hug, while he calls her his greatest pride. In the past, a young, grieving boy stared at his parents' graves under a heavy rain. After that tragic accident, he had been left completely alone and helpless in the world. But in the midst of so much sadness, a helping hand reached out to him. The Sodom couple appeared to rescue the boy from that loneliness. As they were great friends of his parents, they decided to adopt him and bring him to live in their home. The only biological daughter of that kind family was none other than little Shika. Back then, the little girl was extremely quiet and very withdrawn in her own little world. Despite that, she opened her heart and genuinely accepted him, as if he were her real older brother. Back in the present, Soma firmly assures that he will save the girl, no matter the cost. Before he could finish his thought, the fairy starts shouting his name from the back of a glowing cavern. The little one flies around a giant rock, super excited, celebrating that they finally found the black adamantite ore. Holding the shining stone, the kid is super proud while the fairy celebrates his talent as a scout. With a determined look, the artisan guarantees he will find a way to bring the little one back to normal, no matter what it takes. She asks if that pile of crystal is enough, but he says he wants to get double that amount to be able to mass produce. Suggesting they go a little deeper after a rest, the MC is interrupted by a weak voice calling for help. The kid jumps in surprise as he looks to the side and recognizes whose desperate voice it is. Lying on the ground, completely drained of strength, Oliver's group's ninja appears, asking for help. Rushing over to the injured guy, the artisan immediately realizes he's suffering from some kind of negative effect. Without wasting a second, he extends a glowing hand and activates his analysis skill on the adventurer on the ground. He explains that this technique can find healing recipes and even discover which monster caused all that damage. But upon reading the system's holographic screen, the young man's face goes pale as he asks if this has to be some kind of sick joke. The panel reveals the culprit is a mutant poison dragon, a terrifying beast that shouldn't be on this floor at all. Meanwhile, on the surface, the wind blows hard through a wide, open wooden window, illuminating the room. The view shows the vast, peaceful city outside with its well-built buildings. High up on a dangerous rooftop, a figure observes everything from above with great attention. Eve remains focused on the horizon and states aloud that she must fulfill her great duty. Back in the hole, the MC explains that those dragons aren't a big deal, and he could easily handle one. However, the mutant variants are absurdly strong, impossible to defeat even for the paladin Oliver alone. The fairy gulps, asking if they're really that strong, and he confirms that their raw stats are a huge help. The big problem is that no normal magic or antidote works against this variant's lethal poison, leaving the ninja terrified. His little sister wants to know how to save the guy without the ingredients for a serum. He suggests a common potion would only provide temporary relief. The artisan grumbles that things have gotten ugly, and that if they stayed there, they wouldn't find out what really happened. Maintaining a serious expression, the kid concludes that the only viable option now was to go down and investigate the mess. Standing at the edge of a dark pit, he notes that the natural path for mining would end up following that group's footsteps. The young man says he'll go on ahead to check it out, and the little one asks him to be careful. Using a glowing grappling hook, the kid quickly descends, stating that he also needs to prove his worth in this exploration. Famous for her instincts, the fairy gets a shock when she feels something very strange rising from the depths. A pink, poisonous smoke begins to leak from the walls, making the little one decide she needs to warn her brother urgently. Looking at the wreckage below, the artisan understands the situation and comments that she didn't find any sign of Oliver's group. The little one claims she sensed a fight, but he trusts that the paladin knows how to handle himself and use his skills against that gas. The kid reinforces that facing the monster head-on would be suicide, so they should focus on solving their own problem. Thinking quickly, he comments that they could get the ore somewhere else, but quickly dismisses the idea and decides to stick to the plan. The kid explains that the difficulty of exploring the other mining areas was too much for them to handle alone. It ends up being much safer to gather everything here, in secret, than to risk moving to a different spot. The fairy brings up the problem of the lethal smoke, but the MC gives a confident smile, assuring her he already has the solution. Using a pair of tweezers, he quickly extracts a bit of the glow from his little sister's wings, catching her completely off guard. With her hand on her head, she panics, asking what he took. The young man explains that fairy dust is the standard for curing these things. Summoning his technological cube, he announces he's going to mix that special powder with some quality materials. A light shines, and he instantly forges a long protective scarf with glowing scales. Already wearing the gear around his neck, the artisan explains that the piece will block the smoke perfectly, and calls for the girl to keep moving. Walking through the infested tunnel, the kid notices that the concentration of the pink smoke is way too intense on this level. He asks the little one to be in charge of guiding the way through the darkness, and she accepts the mission on the spot. In a courageous leap, the MC uses his energy rope to dive straight into the fissure engulfed by the toxic gas. As soon as he lands, the young man is completely shocked to come face to face with a gigantic barrier of light. Just ahead, the monstrous poison dragon violently attacks the paladin Oliver, who is cornered against the wall. The knight uses his heavy shield to withstand the beast's brute force, but he's clearly reaching his limit. The MC shouts the knight's name, who looks back, exhausted, and laments being seen in such a pathetic situation. Desperate, Oliver says he'll swallow all his pride and begs for the kid's help to avoid getting wiped out. The paladin focuses on the murderous beast and confesses he has no idea how to deal with all that absurd strength alone. Without losing his cool, Soma complains about his nerve, questioning why the group's mage didn't just whip up a serum to save everyone. The knight points to the girls passed out on the rocks and admits he could never save them both on his own. In tears, the team leader offers whatever money it takes and desperately begs the artisan not to let them perish. Giving that confident smile of his, the MC finds all this desperation amusing. Holding his magic cube, the kid announces that a generous reward changes the situation entirely and accepts the contract. Hearing the confirmation, the paladin breaks into a gigantic smile of relief and thanks him from the bottom of his heart. Just then, the mutant monster attacks with fury, digging its claws with all its might against the adventurer's defense. The poisonous creature backs off for a moment as it roars furiously at its prey. Without giving him a break, the dragon opens its mouth and fires a concentrated beam of lethal energy straight at the warrior. Sensing the extreme danger, Oliver slams the ground and conjures his ability to create a gigantic shield of light. The purple beam brutally collides with the golden barrier, generating a shockwave that shakes the entire cavern. With the devastating impact, the knight is dragged back several feet, trying to stay on his feet by sheer force of will. Charging forward mercilessly, the monstrous beast prepares to rip through the warrior's defense with a swipe of its claws. But Oliver is completely surprised to see a small metal cylinder fly right past his face. With a mocking smirk, the artisan throws his grenade and tells the creature to swallow the whole flash. The device explodes in mid-air, releasing an absurdly blinding light that instantly stuns the monster. Caught off guard by the intense brightness, the paladin has to shield his own eyes with his arm. The flash grenade's explosion hits the dragon square in the face, interrupting the creature's attack on the spot. Taking advantage of the distraction, Soma runs past and assures the knight that the life-saving serum would be made quickly. Oliver realizes the danger too late as a giant tail swings with full force in his direction. The swift blow hits the paladin dead on, sending his body flying violently against the sharp rocks. Completely furious, the predator's glowing red eye focuses on its new, running prey. The beast roars, spreading terror, as the fairy screams in panic, warning her brother that the monster was after him. The kid realizes he drew its attention with the flash and activates his cube to quickly create a containment trap. But the beast doesn't give him time to finish and fires another blast of poisonous energy from its mouth. The attack grazes the MC's arm, tearing a scream of pain from the kid as he runs. Defeated on the ground with his arm covered in that lethal smoke, he hears the little fairy screaming his name in tears. Frustrated by the attack, the MC grumbles that his creation was interrupted just like that. Just then, a colossal beam of energy erupts upwards as the dragon roars furiously. The kid looks up immediately, completely surprised by the sudden scene. Recognizing the silhouette in the middle of the light, he quickly realizes who is arriving. Eve appears, shining on the battlefield, making the artisan shout the girl's name in disbelief. Quite calmly, the maid lands on the destroyed ground right in front of the enormous poisonous beast. Confused, Soma wonders what she was doing there and fears that her boss memories might have returned. Desperation hits him hard, as the kid knows they wouldn't stand a chance against a raid monster in their current state. But ignoring all the tension, the robot girl simply flies right past her master. He is left perplexed, observing her absurd speed, even without that giant armor. In the robot's hands, the protective scarf the kid had forged glows intensely. The maid wraps the equipment around the young man's neck, leaving him completely speechless. With a professional posture, she explains that she only came there to return the item he had forgotten. Still processing everything, he stammers out a thank you, while she assures him that this was also a maid's duty. Flying nearby, the little fairy lets out a big sigh of relief that it wasn't an attack. The MC plays along, praising her dedication, while his little sister mentally thanks her lucky stars. Eve laments that she let the fabric tear without noticing, and explains that she planned to fix everything later. Handing the fairy to the girl, the kid asks for her support. The robot agrees to take care of such a troublesome duo. At that moment, the enormous poison dragon lets out a terrifying roar right behind the group. Taking the front line with great confidence, the maid tells them to leave the beast to her. The girl intimidatingly states that eliminating insolent enemies is also part of her daily service. Without wasting time, the monster attacks violently, throwing its sharp claws at the small robot. With just one hand, Eve blocks the colossal impact, generating a large shockwave on the ground. Quickly backing away, the predator opens its mouth and fires a direct stream of poisonous energy at her. The fairy screams in terror because of the poison, but the artisan remains calm, saying there's no reason to worry. Since the mechanical girl doesn't have an organic body, the creature's lethal gas simply has no effect. Unscathed in the middle of the lethal smoke, the robot glares at the enemy with an extremely cold and menacing look. The beast tries to riddle the maid with several explosive shots, forcing her to dodge quickly through the air. Using all her robotic agility, she evades the deadly attacks with precise acrobatics. Soon after, the girl lands firmly on the rocks, already preparing her next move against the beast. Badly injured, Oliver appears, screaming at the top of his lungs that he won't let the monster do whatever it wants. The paladin lands a powerful slash on the creature's leg, creating an explosion of light on impact. Taking advantage of the opening, the little fairy focuses on the beast and immediately activates her weakness detection skill. The system locks its glowing reticle right on the monster's nape, pointing out the exact vital spot for the group. Analyzing the situation from a distance, Soma concludes with frustration that their damage wouldn't be enough to take the beast down. He explains that the knight focuses on defense and the maid, without her giant armor, lacks melee firepower. Making a serum to wake up the fallen mages wouldn't significantly change the course of this as difficult battle either. Holding his luminous cube, the MC makes a quick decision and calls out to the group leader in an imperative tone. Without any beating around the bush, the artisan tells the guy to hand over all the team's items, leaving the knight shocked. Promising to forge a weapon capable of taking down the beast, he convinces the adventurer to toss the materials his way. The kid activates his skills with a motivated smile, guaranteeing victory thanks to the help of that incredible maid. The powerful creation cube shines intensely in the air, quickly fusing all the provided resources. As soon as the process is finished, the young man throws a piece of equipment made of pure light and yells for the robot to grab it. With a very agile leap, Eve spins in the air and catches the new weapon perfectly mid-motion. A golden flash immediately covers the girl's legs, revealing the brutal power of the equipment. Ignoring the monster's desperate attack, the maid dives in with full force, preparing a crushing blow. The new heavy lightning graves equipped on her emit an absurd amount of lethal electricity. Focused on finishing the job, the robot girl locks her merciless gaze directly on the enemy target. The impact of the kick hits the dragon's nape with extreme violence, generating a colossal flash in the cavern. She sinks the weapon into the creature's vital point, discharging all the energy at once. A gigantic pillar of lightning destroys the monstrous beast from top to bottom, illuminating the entire underground scene. Finishing the job with class, the small robot does a backflip, emerging unscathed from the giant explosion. With great lightness, she lands calmly on the stone floor as the debris from the battle falls around her. Holding the rare gem the monster dropped, the maid announces robotically that the mission was a success. Looking at the damage from a distance, the artisan comments with relief about the victory and reminds them he promised they could handle it. The paladin thanks him from the bottom of his heart for the rescue, happy that no one from his team perished in all that madness. Without much talk, the kid hands over the last vial of serum and tells the warrior to save his colleague who was left up top. The duo peacefully bids farewell to the group of adventurers, ready to focus on their own business again. As soon as they are alone in the tunnels, the robot gets her master's attention very respectfully. Making a formal bow, the maid surprises the young man by showing deep gratitude. Completely embarrassed, he brushes it off, saying he just chose the best combat tactic for the situation. The fairy pokes her brother's reddened cheek, teasing the kid for not being able to be honest with his feelings. Quickly changing the subject, the MC decrees that the robot will have to help a lot to raise the fortune of 100 million. Joking, he warns her that, if she doesn't want the hard work, she'd better go find a new master in the labyrinth. Showing a gentle and sincere smile, the girl calmly accepts the challenge. With the profits from sales and the large rescue reward, the group's finances take a wonderful leap in the system. Furthermore, the gathering yielded the coveted adamantite ores in the boss gym, significantly shortening their path. The glowing notification confirms the official addition of the high-level mechanical maid to the artisan's team. Days after that intense battle, the scene cuts to an extremely luxurious mansion in the city. Inside, a butler seriously reports that the kid has obtained the rare items and would soon begin mass production. The blonde woman gives an arrogant smile, admitting she underestimated the young man, but decides she will teach him his place. While the rich woman plots her plans, the atmosphere remains quite calm outside one of the equipment shops. The merchants go crazy when they see the legendary shield forged by the MC with absurdly high stats. Ecstatic with the quality of the artifact, the man throws a gigantic bag of gold coins to close the big deal. Curious, the shopkeeper tries to discover the secret of that forge, but Soma smiles, saying the recipe is a trade secret. Chatting via hologram, a merchant tells the artisan he can get any equipment. Soma agrees, saying he should be able to get most things. This all happened because the kid mined a mountain of black adamantite after defeating that poison dragon. With it, he crafted a total of 5 legendary shields. These items ended up being the perfect bait to sell directly to the rich folks who lost the bidding at the previous grand auction. Negotiating face-to-face completely cut out the auction fees, plus, dealing with greedy merchants opened up several new profitable business opportunities. Focusing on the topic of rare weapons, the MC comments that he finally got his hands on the obscure raw material. Now his idea is to produce a large, poisonous bow. To create this exclusive piece, he just needed to use the gem the last boss dropped. Impressed by the young man's ability, the seller laments that his own wallet can't handle the strain of buying something so absurd. Understanding the situation, the kid thinks it's a shame but quickly suggests the man introduce him to clients willing to pay the price. Laughing heartily, his business partner assures him he'll take care of everything and give priority to the rare weapons in that batch. Now walking through the bustling city streets, the MC hears a familiar voice calling his name. The little blue fairy quickly flies toward him, wanting to know how the conversation went. Without hiding his success, he confirms that everything went perfectly. The kid reveals he sold 2 of the 5 shields for a very high price, calculating that at this rate, they could easily hit the 2 million mark. Pulling a cart full of heavy supplies, Eve praises her master and comments that the negotiations flowed wonderfully. The artisan celebrates that today's heavy item sales will ensure they soon reach the 3 million they have saved up. Keeping her feet on the ground, the robot reminds him that the final goal is 100 million, and that this current balance is very little toward their objective. Remaining calm, he agrees that at the current pace it would take a long time. However, he says he already has his next big step all planned out in his mind. Trying to explain the details, he gives up halfway and prefers to just focus on dispatching the goods they were carrying. The robot is disappointed, as she really wanted to hear the idea. Holding that giant poisonous bow, the artisan plans to find a good buyer for the weapon to fill the team's coffers for the next move. Their journey ends up in an impressive city built atop gigantic trees, famous for gathering many strong hunters. Displaying various packs of arrows and potions on a table, the MC begins to announce that he has everything an explorer in the area could possibly need. The kid excitedly invites the public to take a look without being shy. The strategy soon attracts a curious crowd around their makeshift stall. Taking full advantage of the crowd's attention, Soma decides it's the perfect time to present his best creation. The display of the majestic, glowing bow leaves the hunters in awe. quietly commenting that they had never seen such incredible equipment. Focusing on a potential customer, the artisan tries to convince the young man that this weapon would be a perfect fit for his class. Caught completely off guard by the direct and friendly approach, the customer starts to sweat and stammers, unable to give a clear answer. Seeing the nervous hunters whispering among themselves, the MC gets confused and tries to understand if the options on display weren't good enough. Sensing a weird vibe in the air, the kid notices the tension in the audience. One of the men whispers that the guys wouldn't even take the cheapest items from the stall. Looking closer, Soma notices the problem wasn't a lack of interest or high prices. Just then, someone in the crowd warns in terror that a certain guy had arrived. Heavy footsteps echo across the wooden planks of the bridge. The artisan concludes that the people here are terrified of the consequences if they make a deal. Suddenly, the crowd parts in fear for a large man who soon arrives, yelling very disrespectfully at the kid. Demanding to know who gave him permission to open a stall there, the big man named Hayath approaches, warning that this territory already had an owner. Without showing the slightest scared reaction, the MC just stares at the big guy's tough act in absolute silence. Bothered by his coldness, the hunter scowls. In turn, the kid states that he doesn't know the guy from anywhere and wants to know who the heck he was. Very calmly, Soma introduces himself as a common artisan and asks if the bully needed to know anything else. The hunter and his goons start laughing uncontrollably, mocking the production class and calling the kid a useless nobody who can't do anything right. Used to this kind of childish prejudice, the MC doesn't even pay attention to the insults and just thinks it's been a while since he heard a joke like that. Intimidating the local crowd, Hayath forces the customers to agree that it's much better to buy the weapons he forges himself instead of the newbie artisan's junk. Raising a hand to ask for calm, the kid understands at once that the big guy was using fear to monopolize all sales in the entire area. Soma deduces that the hunter himself produced the area stock, while his rival decides to insult the little fairy, calling her a ridiculous pet. Upon hearing his little sister being insulted for no reason like that, the kid's expression completely changes to one of fury. Curious, Eve asks about the items forged by the bully. In response, the artisan states out loud that he only saw junk worse than standard equipment around here. His pride wounded, the big hunter's eyes widen with hatred, wanting to start a bloody fight. Promising to crush the kid, Hayath boils with rage. Very excited, Soma agrees to settle the problem by suggesting a classic hunter-style duel. The artisan tries to propose a bet, where the loser would be permanently banned from the area, but the coward rejects the condition before even hearing it all. Holding his glowing magic cube, the MC mockingly provokes his rival, asking if he was that scared to take on a high-stakes bet. Completely furious with the repeated provocations, the bully threatens the kid, demanding that he at least put his own exile on the line for his defeat. Stomping the ground with absurd brute force, the hunter kicks up dust, showing he was taking this challenge very seriously. Using the advantage of his own terrain, the big guy quickly leaps to the huge tree branches and yells, accepting the conditions of the initial bet. Drawing his bowstring in mid-air, Hayath warns that in addition to the ban, he'll give the artisan a beating he'll never recover from. Staring down at his prey below, he declares the rule that each must forge their own weapon, and whoever lands the first shot would be the grand winner. The arrogant hunter fires a colossal energy arrow downward, promising to teach him firsthand the huge difference in skill between their two worlds. However, the big guy freezes in shock when he sees that his deadly attack simply didn't cause the quick damage he expected. Catching the enemy arrow in mid-air with ease using a concentrated magic barrier, Soma mockingly apologizes for the inconvenience. Summoning the Brahmastra, bathed in golden light, the artisan explains that the weapon has a foolproof automatic tracking mechanism. Sighing with weariness, the kid laments having wasted his most valuable materials on this useless guy, knowing he'd have to buy everything again to serve his clients. The golden arrows tear through the forest in a relentless pursuit, making sharp turns in the air to corner the hunter from the flanks. Running desperately along the huge branches, Hayath flees from the homing shots, swearing violent revenge against the kid who ruined his reputation. Seeing that it would be impossible to keep dodging forever under these conditions, the hunter activates a special technique, his eyes sparking with hatred. A whirlwind of green energy explodes around the man as he bellows the name of his advanced skill focused on summoning monstrous beasts. On the safe ground below, the MC notices the change in the atmosphere and looks up suspiciously, while the little robot asks if something was wrong. A gigantic horde of demonic beasts plummets furiously through the gaps in the trees, catching the entire group of local adventurers by surprise. Chaos reigns in the small wooden village as the cowardly hunter from before flees in absolute panic, claiming the situation has become an irreversible disaster. Amid the desperate screaming, some customers try to organize a makeshift defense line as the brutal monsters advance mercilessly. Acting quickly and coldly, Eve lands a devastating kick on one of the beasts, taking control of the front line to protect the merchandise. Clearing the area with her heavy weapon, the maid finds the perfect coordination of the invading pack strange, thinking their formations were too organized for a natural attack. Hiding high up in the trunks, Hayath celebrates the destruction down below. The artisan deduces that this orchestrated mess was the work of that guy's technique. The MC considers if his rival planned to wipe the entire area out of spite, but soon understands that the rain of monsters was just a big distraction. Quickly analyzing the battlefield, the kid concludes that the village wasn't the hunter's main prize and decides to think like the assassin would. Suddenly, Soma freezes on the spot as he solves the puzzle, figuring out exactly where the real danger of that cowardly plan would come from. Confirming his suspicions completely, the kid focuses on the lethal arrow tearing through the mist, coming straight for him for a stealth kill. A true rain of golden arrows begins to descend from the sky mercilessly, trying to impale the unsuspecting target from all possible angles. The artisan slides away, narrowly escaping the shower of shots. The fairy shouts the likely location of the shooter, and he decides to crush the hunter directly at the source. Pulling the Brahmastra's magic string to its absolute limit, the kid fires his counter attack and privately hopes the arrow can reach that distance. The trail of bluish light cuts through the skies of the dense forest at a terrifying speed, adjusting its route mid-flight to hunt down the hidden enemy. Believing he was safe in his distant position, the big guy just watches in bewilderment as the blinding magic of the dead on arrow kisses his own face. It all starts with the golden arrows tearing through the forest in a relentless pursuit against the hunter from the flanks. Looking back, Hayato grumbles that amateurs are useless and questions if the kid doesn't know about damage drop off at a distance. Confident, he assesses that the attack's power must be weak by now and brags about having a special ability to mitigate that loss. The hunter claims he'll keep shooting at the kid while he's pinned down by the beasts, considering it the best style of battle. But his arrogance soon turns to shock as he holds the object that was attached to the arrow. The big guy's eye reflects the intense glow of the sudden ignition. A violent explosion hits the hunter dead on, tearing a scream of pain from the guy. Plummeting through the giant branches, he wonders if the artisan forged a bomb and tries to convince himself he can take the hit. Just then, Hayato notices several other arrows with explosives falling right next to his face. A second colossal detonation engulfs the big guy in midair, causing devastating damage to the forest. On the ground, Soma lowers his bow and scoffs, asking if his rival really thought he would fight using normal tactics. Remaining calm, the kid just watches the result of his work with great tranquility. Soon after, a blue-haired adventurer approaches, thanking the MC profusely for saving them from that predator. Eve carries a pile of coins and items, while the artisan says that buying his merchandise was more than enough thanks. However, the customer gets worried and questions if the big guy's ban wouldn't be useless, since it was just a verbal promise. Thinking about it, the young man comments that the residents there would like to make a special request to the artisan. He explains that the assembly hall in the tree was built by the explorers themselves to serve as a base. Originally, the place's administration was fairly divided among 10 volunteers from the advanced hunter classes. The group kept the base running perfectly, combining the strength of all its members. But, one by one, these administrators vanished during explorations, until only Hayato was left in total control of everything. The MC understands that the big guy used the unique privileges of an administrator to monopolize the place and act like he owned it. The adventurer reveals rumors that the hunter himself murdered his colleagues, leaving Soma disgusted by the cruelty. Stopping in front of a huge area, the young man apologizes for the delay. The artisan immediately wants to know what the job would be. The fairy and the kid stare in awe at the colossal, illuminated divine tree right in the center of the village. The client then asks if the MC would be able to forge an entirely new base using that sacred tree as the material. He details that with a new base, they could simply lock Hayato out forever. Worried about the size of the task, the blue fairy questions if her brother could do something so huge on his own. Playing with the magic cube in his hand, the artisan assures them it's possible, but warns that a service of this scale would require a fitting payment. Full of excitement, the adventurer offers 5 million gold coins, money painstakingly saved by everyone there. Hearing that absurd amount, the kid shows extreme greed and declares the negotiation a success. Already focused on the job, the kid asks if they should finish it all today. The young man panics, remembering the old base took a month. Displaying his holographic cube, Soma explains that the delay happens because people forge the pieces bit by bit. The client is impressed to see the artisan summon 2 cubes at once, considering it an incredibly advanced technique. But the young man's astonishment truly grows when dozens of forging matrices appear floating around the MC, enveloping the colossal tree with all his creation magic. The kid announces he's going to get to work. Soma throws his arms up, releasing an absurd amount of shining energy throughout the area. A majestic flash illuminates the entire forest as he executes his grand, scale-forging technique. Seen from above, the cold, brilliant energy begins to rapidly shape the raw wood, transforming the scenery. New bridges, stairs, and luxurious cabins magically appear, attached to the gigantic trunks in a matter of seconds. Observing the new and imposing finished fortress, the MC breathes a sigh of relief and announces that the job is complete. Far away, Hayato drags himself across the dirty ground, completely exhausted and unable to accept his own humiliating defeat. Suddenly, the elegant steps of a woman approach the defeated big guy, saying she watched everything. The mysterious figure laments his fall, revealing that it took a lot of work to take out the other administrators and leave him in power. The hunter begs for mercy, saying it was a mistake, but a lethal magic beam pierces his head without any ceremony. With Hayato's body thrown on the ground, the shining woman on the branch assures that she'll make good use of his life. Soon, the system panel displays a profit of 750,000 coins from the sale of the black shields. Next, the sale of the large poisonous bow adds another 180,000 coins to the artisan's funds. The smaller consumables sold to the forest hunters bring in another 60,000 for the team's account. Adding everything up with the 5 million prize for the base construction, the net profit of the operation hits an impressive mark. Walking with great satisfaction, the kid calculates that they now have 7 million saved up and only 93 million to go. Soma confesses to the maid that the reward from the base saved the day, but he's happy the weapons also sold well. Analyzing the production costs, he notes that materials take up almost half the profit and plans to urgently lower that margin. Reading the floating reports on the street, the kid laments not being able to gather everything himself to save even more money. His financial reading is interrupted when a virtual envelope appears floating right in front of his face. The MC is shocked when he opens the message, realizing it was a direct summons from the Self-Governance Committee. The fairy and the maid are confused, watching his desperation, wanting to know what this committee was. The truth is, the Labyrinth of Illusions was a massive dungeon that appeared out of nowhere in reality, based on the original game. Unlike the online game, which had moderators to punish toxic players, this new world had no official laws. Consequently, the dungeon accepted any type of explorer, allowing criminals and murderers to roam freely. To combat this mess, a group of volunteers created the said committee. Now, the duo waited nervously on the sofa in the organization's mansion. Resting his face in his hand, the kid doubts the competence of that group, since cruel hunters did whatever they wanted there. The artisan quickly deduces that the organization only had enough power to maintain order in the safe areas on the surface. His thoughts are cut short when a man in a suit with blue hair enters the room, thanking the team for their presence. The man sits in a luxurious armchair and says that the woman beside him would be responsible for explaining the details of the meeting. The very elegant blonde woman formally introduces herself. The kid immediately realizes she belongs to a high-level class. Walking across the room in her expensive heels, the woman reveals she knows the MC is the only max-level artisan in this world. Maintaining his posture on the sofa, Soma listens as the rich woman states that he was the only one to complete all the recipes from the original game. The blonde lifts the kid's chin with her finger, praising the fact that he never showed off, which made him a true hidden legend. The artisan just glares at her hand, while she concludes that only someone with his talent could make those shields. Arrogantly fixing her hair, the woman comments that it took a lot of work to dig up all that confidential information about him. The kid immediately recognizes her face from the grand auction, not understanding why this rich woman wanted to see him now. Without letting his guard down for a second, the MC maintains an extremely serious expression, waiting for the next move. Observing the daylight through the large office window, the woman says she'll be direct and make a single demand. Displaying a controlling and cold gaze, the madam orders the kid to immediately stop selling his counterfeit rare items. Caught completely off guard by the absurd accusation, Soma stands frozen, not understanding any of this. Ignoring the authenticity of the pieces, the blonde snootily questions why she has to stop her sales. She states obviously that all this production was crashing the market value of her personal collection. The rich woman explains that collecting rare items was her only purpose here, and all this scarcity was being ruined. Outraged by the trivial reason, Soma yells, asking if this was some kind of sick joke. Just then, the man in the suit intervenes in the discussion, announcing that the madam has requested to settle the entire dispute through a trial by combat. The man details that the format will be a grand public duel in the arena, and that the use of representatives was fully permitted. Hearing the rules, the kid lowers his head and remains in absolute silence, analyzing the tense situation. He reflects that solving problems through duels wasn't rare, even being quite common in this world. Desperate, the blue fairy panics at the prohibition. The young man thinks that if he stops selling rare items, he'll never raise the cash to save her. Even so, he knows that refusing the fight wouldn't do any good, as that woman would find another way to mess with his business. But suddenly the MC looks up as he realizes a huge advantage in all of this. He concludes that winning a public duel in the grand arena would bring incredible publicity and the official seal of approval for his products. Despite the good idea, the artisan remains suspicious, as the madam's arrogant posture didn't seem like that of a common explorer. Curious, the fairy asks the maid about the rich woman's class. The robot explains that it was just a starting category for newbies. Hearing the explanation, the kid agrees and grumbles that this was exactly why the situation was becoming dangerous. The MC deduces that the blonde uses her real, world money to hire strong hunters while she stays safe on the surface. Suspicious of the origin of that fortune, he is certain the madam will hire a combat specialist, and the only question is if they can beat him. Pressuring the kid, the rich woman demands an immediate answer and threatens to take other measures if he decides to run from the challenge. Without backing down, Soma accepts the proposal on the condition that she drops the matter for good if he wins, and she swears on her pride. Now walking through the city streets, the robot asks if her master is sure about this, as the enemy fighter would certainly be terrifying. Eve respectfully confesses that her current combat skills wouldn't be up to the task, and he agrees on the spot. The kid admits that his own stats are terrible compared to real warriors, plus he doesn't have any attack skills. Showing the gold bars in the system, he assures his sister that he only accepted this absurd risk because he truly saw a chance. Stopping his walk, the artisan looks firmly at the maid and says he wants her to be his official representative in the grand tournament. Completely surprised, the mechanical girl accepts the order but sincerely asks if he wasn't overestimating her potential. The robot reveals she assessed the madam's giant bodyguard and calculated that their chance of victory was no more than 30%. Finding it funny, the MC says he was only expecting 10%. The fairy gets very annoyed at the comment and threatens to punch him. Getting serious again, the kid reminds them that they also didn't have the necessary stats to beat that poison dragon in the past. He reinforces that the true strength of that victory didn't come from raw power, but from the overpowered equipment he himself had forged. Holding his magic cube with total confidence, the artisan guarantees he can create even the most lethal weapons in the game if he has the right materials. Understanding the logic, the robot kneels with a collar, pretending to be a pet monster. The kid dies of embarrassment and tells her to stop. Getting back to the main topic, the little fairy warns that the real nightmare here would be getting all the high-quality materials in time. His little sister short-circuits, calculating that they didn't have the money to buy everything and the 3-day deadline was too tight to focus on that. Maintaining his calm smile, the MC reassures the girl, guaranteeing he already had a perfect plan to solve this problem. The artisan explains that rare items for mechanical dolls drop from bosses of the same type, and says they're going to recycle the carcass of the old giant machine. Looking at the colossal scrap in the shadows, he states that those abandoned metal remains were the definitive key to victory in the duel. Without wasting time, the kid starts tearing off valuable plates and cables from the machine's damaged structure. Holding a glowing technological piece, Soma celebrates excitedly for having found another important component. The blue fairy also celebrates the Great Hall, while he is thankful for the luck that no other explorer had cleaned out the place before. Observing the huge installations, the kid explains that the boss room regenerated on its own, protecting the scrap from natural wear and tear. Hanging from a rope, he grumbles that this same automatic regeneration also forced the team to blow up the entrance all over again. At that moment, the maid approaches carrying a basket full of components and announces she has finished her sweep of the area. The MC thanks her for the effort. The robot girl replies very politely and leaves all the heavy forging work in her master's hands. Fixing her own hair, Eve confesses she wishes her weapon-generating ability was working normally. With a sad expression, the machine laments that this special function was destroyed along with all her old memories. The MC agrees, remembering that some high-level mechanical monsters did indeed have this absurd creation ability. Since her original version was a relentless raid monster, the young man imagines her personal weapon must have dealt brutal and terrifying damage. Turning his back on the fallen machine, the kid sighs in resignation and says there's no use crying over a broken function. However, the little robot interrupts her master's thoughts, getting his attention very hesitantly. Walking beside him, Eve reveals that all the files about her own origin remained completely locked in the system. She explains that she managed to track a large amount of frozen memories hidden deep within her database. The maid suggests unfreezing these files to try to recover the weapon generation, but the artisan forbids the idea on the spot. With a tense look, Soma is absolutely certain that this information was her raw data as a major enemy boss. The kid freezes just imagining his companion recovering her murderous consciousness and turning against them all of a sudden. But his dark thoughts are quickly interrupted when the girl calls for him once more. Staring at the young man up close, the the robot questions if he really trusted his own ability to forge something strong enough to win. Flying in his face, the fairy reinforces the pressure, warning that the future of her human form depended exclusively on the quality of those items. However, his little sister soon breaks into a giant smile and says everything would be fine, as she blindly trusted her older brother's talent. Hearing that vote of confidence, the MC gives a very self-assured smile and tells them to leave all the heavy lifting to him. The day of the tournament arrives, and the grand public arena is roaring with the cheers of the crowd as the announcer introduces the two representatives. The rich woman shows off her imposing battle champion named Gilbert with an extremely proud posture. On the other side of the arena, the newbie artisan is represented by his unusual mechanical maid, creating a bizarre contrast on the field. Scared by the huge audience, the fairy screams nervously. The kid relaxes, knowing no one there recognized his machine's monstrous identity. The big man repeats the rules out loud, reminding them that defeat occurs when life points hit 0 and the machine shuts down. Scowling, the experienced warrior confesses he found it extremely disrespectful to have to fight a simple pet monster. In response, the robot suggests he praise his opponent a lot now, so he'll have better excuses when he ends up losing badly in the end. Analyzing the enemy from a distance, Soma calculates that the madam spent a fortune to bring in a mercenary close to level 600. The MC concludes that hunters above that level preferred to risk it in the depths, making this guy the best option on the market. But despite the experienced bodyguard's raw strength, the artisan knows that Eve's victory was guaranteed with the new equipment he created. Without further ado, a man sounds the great gong of the arena, and the official battle is declared for all the public to see. Wanting to get it over with quickly, Gilbert grabs his giant axe and prepares a merciless blow. The warrior brings the heavy blade down with a thunderous force, destroying the stone floor beneath the small girl's feet. The violence of the blow generates a true explosion of dust and debris that takes over the center of the battlefield. Trying to shield himself from the gust, Soma hears the shocked audience wondering if the duel was already over with the first attack. However, the experienced warrior senses something is wrong and furrows his brow, looking into the dense cloud of smoke. But the little robot easily blocks that colossal impact using the powerful black scale shield. Watching from a distance, the rich woman is completely shocked to see the maid's impenetrable defense. Taking advantage of the opening, Eve activates a technique through her eyes, firing a lethal wave of petrification. The big man's eyes widen in absolute surprise at that bizarre counter-attack. A purple flash engulfs the warrior, while the narrator warns that turning to stone, there would be an instant defeat without support. However, the experienced opponent shatters the magic by accumulating an insane amount of energy in his body. Completely furious, Gilbert warns that he was already prepared, and that negative effects were useless against him. Without showing any frustration, the mechanical girl simply states that she would then take the offensive in the fight. Activating glowing flight thrusters and blades on her arms, she leaps into the air at a terrifying speed. In a violent dive, the maid charges forward, spinning her own body like a true deadly saw. But the warrior reacts quickly and raises his heavy sword, managing to defend against the aerial attack just in time. With that, a relentless shower of swift cuts begins to clash against the giant's defense. The violence of the blows generates many bright sparks, making the big guy notice that his enemy suddenly vanished. Demonstrating absurd agility, the robot reappears in the air right in the opponent's blind spot. Without mercy, she lands a double slash on the warrior's back, forming a large luminous X with her blade. Watching the intense exchange from a distance, the little fairy panics, fearing the worst. Soon after, the maid lands, releasing blue sparks from her body after taking a very strong hit. The girl ends up falling to her knees on the arena floor, clearly suffering from the accumulated damage to her mechanical structure. Gilbert arrogantly warns her that she should give up soon, if she didn't want to be destroyed forever. Ignoring the warrior's merciless threat, the little robot stands up firmly, back in the fight. Maintaining absolute calm, the artisan trusts the plan and reassures his desperate little sister beside him. In the arena, Eve politely thanks the enemy for his concern, but says there was no need. The MC shows great excitement and comments that the real show was only just beginning. Just then, the mechanical girl's eyes glow intensely as she initiates a new system process. Summoning an overload weapon, a colossal piece of equipment in the shape of a Tyrannosaurus head appears on her arm. The big guy finds the new technology amusing and agrees that the real fight was about to begin for real. Getting into the mood for the decisive battle, the warrior discards his own sword, throwing the equipment far away on the ground. The little robot charges at high speed, pointing the giant mechanism straight at the target. The big man raises his strength to the maximum and summons a gigantic demonic axe, exuding a lethal red aura. Excited by the challenge, Gilbert brings his brutal weapon down with everything he's got, wanting to test the machine's resistance. The maid raises her guard, using the new monstrous structure as a frontal shield against the lightning-fast attack. The brutal impact between the two colossal weapons generates a gigantic energy wave that sweeps through the arena's air. At that moment, the eye of the Tyrannosaurus mechanism lights up with an intense red glow, preparing a surprise. A devastating laser is fired at point-blank range, causing a thunderous, fiery explosion. Caught completely by surprise by the fiery counterattack, the warrior retreats, not understanding the origin of the shot. Foaming with rage at the humiliation, the big man bellows at the top of his lungs, charging back at the little robot. However, Eve simply glides across the battlefield, dodging the heavy axe with absurd lightness. Confident, Gilbert brags that the overpowered equipment was a masterpiece made by his own rich master. The mechanical girl coldly refutes the taunt, guaranteeing that losing while using the artisan's creation would be impossible. With that, the machine advances aggressively, sinking the giant technological structure straight into the opponent's chest. The warrior takes the hit, grumbling in pain, while his boss watches from the sidelines, biting her nails in desperation. The big man is shocked to see fragments of his defense flying and questions how the unbreakable armor gave way. Doing a stylish backflip, the maid explains that the kid had already anticipated the poison's cancellation. The little one details that the mouth of that metallic Tyrannosaurus was specifically focused on completely destroying defenses. Landing with great calm, the machine apologizes in advance, claiming the ending would be a bit disappointing. The robot announces that her opponent would provide the publicity by slamming his metallic head against the arena floor, taking advantage of the complete absence of the enemy's armor. Eve fires the lethal wave of petrification once more. The blonde madam freezes in the stands with a completely terrified expression in the face of her own financial failure. The entire audience in the gigantic Roman arena falls into absolute silence, trying to process that crazy turn of events. The announcer goes wild, narrating the shocking comeback as the big guy ends up transformed into a stone statue. The little maid waves to the crazed crowd after being declared the grand winner of that dangerous duel. Slamming the table in frustration, the rich woman listens to the narrator praise how the worst class in the world achieved immense glory. The artisan runs across the arena, ignoring all safety rules, to retrieve his brilliant champion. Very proud of his work, the kid approaches with an expression of total relief and comfort. The fairy flies happily, hugging her metal friend who displays a confident posture, celebrating the mission's success. Time moves on, and the scene changes to a beautiful sunny morning outside the peaceful houses of the big city. Soma confirms to the fairy that all those dozens of holographic notifications on the screen were accumulated forging requests. Super excited, his little sister celebrates that the public finally recognized the true utility of his absurd talent. Eve appears, bringing a tray of hot tea, and comments that the most important thing was the financial leap in local sales. Blushing beet red, the maid calls the kid big brother for the first time, making him quite embarrassed. The robot considers working until her arms fall off from exhaustion to pay off her moral debt, but he freaks out, completely rejecting the idea. The MC freezes, hearing the crazy talk of the two girls, just wanting to escape that sentimental tension. Crying with happiness, the blue fairy expresses immense gratitude to her companion for her colossal effort in the arena. The artisan and his new representative pay close attention to the little one's extremely sincere declaration. Bowing her head formally, the mechanical girl reassures the siblings, pointing out that she only did her natural duty. Suddenly, a giant holographic warning appears in the air, drawing the group's attention to the pending negotiations. Maintaining his seriousness, Soma clarifies that it was a receipt for the completion of the city's exclusive auction. The kid recalls the scene of glory and states that he listed several rare items, imagining the marketing would bring a return. Very curious about the guaranteed money, the artisan clicks on the message, desperate to see the auction's big winner. The system details the data for each newly forged black shield and legendary armor that had found an owner. The panel reveals that absolutely the entire giant batch of equipment had been aggressively snapped up by the blonde madam. The MC lets out a villainous laugh, deducing that she blew a fortune just to try to maintain the monopoly of her own collection. Watching the kid laugh hysterically at the dirty money, the duo of girls just stares at him with profound boredom. Appreciating the view of the rich village, the young man admits he loves the foolishness of millionaires and decides to focus solely on increasing his clientele. A long financial record calculates the new sales, indicating that the team still needed to raise almost 89 million. Frustrated, a mage walks through a dark alley, grumbling indignantly about the situation. Staring at an auction hologram, he confirms the exclusive buyer was the blonde madam and recognizes the artisan from before. The mage slams the panel, furious for having lost his henchman, and questions why only that newbie was doing so well. Just then, a mysterious hooded figure emerges from the shadows. Noticing the wizard Ignis's irritation, the stranger extends a hand and offers enough power for him to go head to head with Soma if he accepted the help. Surprised at being called by his own name, the mage quickly brushes the detail aside. Regaining his confidence, he demands to receive that power immediately, threatening to take out the stranger if it was some kind of joke. Without any warning, a glowing magic dagger is plunged deep into the wizard's chest. The sudden impact makes the guy spit up blood as he tries to understand what just happened. Desperate, he questions who this person was, but the hooded man simply tells him to accept the gift. The magic blade sinks even deeper, releasing a dark energy that tears an agonizing scream from the guy. Far away, the kid assesses his funds and concludes that the 10 million accumulated is still a long way from the big goal. Because of this, he decides to put the next step into action, while the robot confirms she was already aware of the plan. However, the group walks through the city, stopping in front of a large building to begin negotiations. Opening the door with great determination, the MC says he's been wanting to do this for a long time. Entering the establishment, the kid is formally received by a real estate agent who was already awaiting his arrival. The man confirms that the visit was to evaluate a rental shop, and the artisan says he would make a decision after looking at everything. That huge place functioned as a mechanic of the labyrinth itself, allowing adventurers to rent spaces to sell their items. The game's automatic system would handle all financial transactions and general administration, making life easier for the owners. The kid explains to the maid that competition for the shops was insane, and rents could easily reach into the millions. Even with the high prices, he points out that the advantages were well worth it, especially since they didn't need to hire employees. Having a shop meant being able to explore dungeons and produce items while sales happened on their own in complete safety. The little blue fairy flies around, paying close attention to the conversation, but soon raises a very pertinent question. She finds it very bizarre that such a well-located commercial spot in the middle of the city was completely empty. Seeing the agent sweat nervously, the little girl pressures him on the spot, but the man swears the property is extremely safe and recommended. Trying to hide his nervousness, the realtor excitedly lists the spacious floors and the incredible comfort the building offered. Despite all the positive advertising, he hesitates a lot, feeling he needed to confess an important detail. Mustering his courage, the man reveals the local rumors that the shop was haunted by ghosts, terrifying the fairy immediately. The little one completely panics at the idea, while the agent tries to calm things down, reinforcing that it was just an urban legend. Shaking all over, she imagines a bizarre ghost in the place, and the man agrees that all these crazy stories were bad for business. Finding it all a big joke, the MC cracks a smile and says he'd love to see a real ghost in that place. The kid quickly deduces that the supposed haunting must be just some loose monster on the surface or a dumb prank. The maid confesses in a bizarre tone that she also really wanted to see a real spirit, making the fairy scream in disagreement with both of them. Anticipating problems with magical entities, the artisan already uses his system to forge several protection talismans and holy water. At that exact moment, a bluish, glowing ghost mysteriously appears, floating behind the shop's main counter. The little fairy freezes completely, entering a state of mute panic as she comes face to face with the scary apparition. Finding her voice, she flies desperately behind the kid's neck, screaming at the top of her lungs that the thing had arrived. The young man turns his head, confused, and very calmly states that he wasn't seeing anything at all in that corner. Trembling behind him, the little one questions if it was a real spirit, but he tells her to calm down, holding his new items. Analyzing the situation coldly, the MC remembers that many monsters of this type had the native ability to become invisible. The mechanical girl ponders that the fairy was the only one there capable of seeing it precisely, because she had her scout abilities active. The kid understands that this entity must be the root of all the rumors, and asks his sister to point out the creature's exact position. Still terrified of that bizarre floating thing, the little one hesitates a lot, unable to form a proper sentence. Hiding behind her brother's hair, she points to the counter and says the ghost was still completely stationary in that corner. With this confirmation, the real estate agent suggests the group split up to search for other monsters scattered throughout the property. Holding a huge sacred scroll, the little one gains courage, remembering that the defensive items would work perfectly here. The artisan agrees with the plan and instructs his little sister to douse the ghost with holy water as soon as the talisman reacted to its presence. Without wasting time, the MC pushes the realtor to get to work, reminding him that maintaining order in the place was also his duty. Whining, the agent grumbles that the committee had already tried various tactics and nothing worked, leaving the fairy very annoyed with his cowardice. Determined to solve this problem herself, the little one scowls and heads for a direct confrontation with the entity. She flies slowly toward the glowing creature, deducing that the sacred paper would shine when it got close to the supernatural target. The girl finally extends her arms and positions the large protective scroll right in the face of the static apparition. Seeing that nothing happened immediately, she starts shaking the spell against the bluish figure with great force and nervousness. The ghostly creature remains untouchable, ignoring the magic, making the girl realize it wasn't a monster from the game. Trying to find a logical explanation, the little one starts to think that this whole spooky scene was just an illusion spell cast by some mage. The fairy continues to observe the apparition, not understanding a single thing that was happening in that abandoned hall. Suddenly, she notices that the ghost's posture seemed to be intensely focused on a blind spot hidden behind the shop's counter. Driven by extreme curiosity, the little one slowly flies down there, suspecting she would find an important clue. But without any warning, a gigantic shadowy claw erupts from the shadows on the floor, catching the investigator completely by surprise. The girl turns her head in terror as a strong, dark, and lethal aura quickly takes over that small space. The demonic hand grabs the fairy with great violence, making the little one drop the talisman and scream in panic in the middle of the shop. Completely powerless to fight back, she begins to be mercilessly dragged into a portal of black goo on the wooden floor. Meanwhile, the original bluish entity remains stationary in the same spot, watching the macabre scene without showing any reaction. Being pulled into the beyond, his little sister completely panics, realizing that the protective items had failed once again against this thing. Sinking rapidly into the darkness, she realizes with terror that this abomination wasn't a cataloged ghost from the game either. Deep within that shadowy portal, a horrifying humanoid creature smiles sadistically with the fairy trapped in its claws. Outside the shop, the real estate agent states with absolute certainty that something extremely dangerous inhabited that place. Coming down the stairs calmly, the kid defends his little sister's character, guaranteeing she would never make up a senseless lie. With the talismans in hand, the artisan adopts an analytical strategy and says they needed to test all hypotheses to reveal the enemy. Walking thoughtfully, the MC dismisses the existence of real spirits, sadly remembering his lonely past without his parents. Quickly regaining his spirits, he decides to focus on the practical problems of the dungeon and finally calls out for his exploration partner. However, a disturbing silence dominates the floor below, making the young man question the girl's absence with great concern. Back in the darkened dimension, the little fairy squirms in shock as she confirms up close the true dark nature of that monster. Desperate, she recognizes the hideous face of the giant creature and warns that the beast was actually a very rare darkness-type spirit. Completely crushed in the monster's hands, the girl perfectly understands why no exorcism spell had worked at the counter. Trapped in the darkness, the little fairy laments that the light from outside can drive away the shadows, but being in here, she can do absolutely nothing. Crying desperately, she mentally begs for her older brother to notice her disappearance and come rescue her. Just then, she recalls a childhood secret she never told anyone. Back when she first met Soma, the little girl felt very scared and anxious. Being very young, the girl couldn't quite understand why her parents and friends' son had come to live in their house. The girl tried to be nice in front of everyone, but deep down, she felt like her family and her home were being stolen. Because of this, the little one ended up getting lost one day in a place that became completely dark. Crouched on the ground, crying her eyes out, the little girl truly believed she was going to perish there like that. However, the young boy appeared, holding a lantern and calling for her, in the middle of the darkness. The little one confesses that her older brother came, looking for her, and that she would never forget that day for the rest of her life. Back in the present, the dark ceiling is violently torn apart by a spear of pure light, catching the monster by surprise. The shadowy creature lets out a bizarre scream of pain as the fairy watches the attack impressed. With her hope renewed, she shows immense happiness. Taking advantage of the monster being crushed by the icy magic, the little one flies straight up, screaming for her brother. The girl quickly ascends toward the illuminated hole from where the powerful attack was fired. As soon as she reaches the surface, his little sister buries her face in the artisan's chest, who receives her holding his glowing cube. Clinging to the young man, the little fairy breaks down in tears, thanking the heavens for being safe. The artisan keeps his gaze fixed on the dark hole as the creature bubbles down below. Completely furious, the abomination charges at high speed, swearing that the two of them wouldn't get out alive. Without hesitation, the MC readies his new luminous equipment and fires a direct blow at the target. The impact of the light punch hits the spirit with crushing force, illuminating the entire shop. Crouched on the floor with his weapon stuck in the wood, the kid warns that the creature picked the wrong opponent and tells it to get lost. The brilliant energy completely disintegrates the dark monster in an instant. Impressed, the real estate agent claps and praises the young man's ability to discover the enemy's true identity. The MC agrees, explaining that the thing that pulled his little sister looked like a ghost, which immediately raised the main suspicion. The kid details that he only needed to use the light from a solar mirror to force the creature out of the shadows. Right after that, it was just a matter of crushing the beast using the elemental weakness of that new light-focused fist weapon. The artisan brags about the result of his improvised forge. Just then, the agent questions why the entity focused on the little fairy, Soma concludes it was precisely because she managed to see the creature watching them, hidden from a distance behind the counter. The bluish apparition was just a decoy, and the fairy ended up being attacked when she tried to investigate the source of that dangerous gaze. At that exact moment, a real ghost appears, floating right behind the agent and the maid, without anyone noticing. Beginning to fade into particles of light, the true spirit thanks the group for their help and peacefully moves on. Watching the glow disappear, the little fairy puts the pieces together and finally understands what was happening there. Now outside the shop, she deduces that the ghost was of an adventurer killed by the dark monster, who was only seeking revenge. Meanwhile, inside a dark church, a voice echoes indignantly, unable to believe the abomination's defeat. A man slams his fist on the table, freaking out with rage and yelling that the result made no sense at all. Mocking his colleague's frustration, a shadowy figure laughs loudly, stating that he deserved to fail. The hunter Hayato criticizes the plan, finding it too convoluted to hide a beast in a shop just to try to take out a simple artisan. Completely offended, the mage Ignis retorts that attacking openly on the surface would cause too many unnecessary problems. Interrupting the useless argument, a hooded figure walks down the corridor, praising the strategy of hurting those close to the target. The mysterious person adjusts their hood, maintaining an extremely cold and threatening posture. The hooded leader reveals herself to be a white-haired woman named Diablo and confesses she was disappointed with the mission's failure. Startled by the sudden presence of his master, the wizard starts stammering nervously, trying to justify himself. Ignoring the excuses, the leader calls the two failures by name as their shadows tremble in fear. With a psychopathic look, the woman warns the two not to forget the real reason they were given new powers. Faced with the threat of imminent demise, the villains break into a cold sweat and swear they won't fail the next attempt. The light illuminates the church's stained glass window as the hunter tells the useless mage to back off and stay out of it. The villain demands his colleague watch in silence, as the next assassination attempt would be all his. Transformed into a bizarre bird monster, Hayato leaps, swearing he himself would massacre the darned artisan. A few weeks after that macabre incident with the spirits, the atmosphere in the city calms down again. The team's new shop finally opens its doors and quickly attracts a crowd of loyal customers every day. Focused in his workshop, the MC forges nonstop, turning profits into new materials to keep the wheel spinning. He recalls spending almost all his gold reserves to renovate the entire building and buy the heavy initial stock. However, the artisan sees that spent fortune merely as a necessary investment to multiply his capital in the future. The success is so great that average daily sales hit 200,000 coins, leaving a huge net profit for the group. Calculating everything on the holographic calculator, the kid animatedly concludes that at this rate, the goal would be met in just 3 months. Thanks to the stabilized financial situation, Soma decides it's time to start accepting custom forge orders again. The young man analyzes the pending requests on the panel and suggests accepting the contract from a certain Mechanical Doll Appreciation Club. The maid moves closer to the screen, her eyes shining, very focused on the job aimed at robots like herself. Breaking into a cold sweat, the little fairy is visibly uncomfortable with the idea and confesses she has a very personal reason for not wanting to go. His little sister shyly explains that the president of this club was an old exploration companion of hers who disappeared a long time ago. Maintaining a nervous smile, the little one asks if the artisan saw any problem with refusing that request. But ignoring her discomfort, he accepts the mission on the spot, making the maid celebrate while the fairy completely freaks out. The next day, the group goes to a bustling city square to meet the mysterious client. Sipping his tea, the kid comments that doll fans are usually pretty weird people and hopes his friend isn't the same. At that moment, a woman wearing a provocative religious outfit approaches, waving in a very scandalous manner. Totally relieved, the fairy breaks into a big smile and greets her old friend by her real name. The cleric is indignant about the name leak but is soon shocked to confirm that the little blue monster was indeed Shika. Watching the shouting match in the middle of the street, the MC is speechless and asks someone to explain all this craziness. Very excited, the religious woman says she founded the fan club and confesses she was amazed by the robot's performance in the grand duel. The woman begins to analyze every detail of the maid up close, praising the sculpting of her face and the machine's mechanical joints. Thrilled, the cleric focuses solely on talking to the robot about stylish clothes, completely ignoring the artisan's comments. The friendly reunion vibe is in full swing right near the gigantic entrance that led directly to the labyrinth's depths. The group continues to chat casually at the square's table, oblivious to the imminent danger. Suddenly, the kid's eyes widen as he focuses on a point above, feeling a gigantic shadow cover the place. A huge monstrous bird dives from the skies at high speed, preparing a lightning-fast attack against the distracted team. Trapped in the darkness, the little fairy laments that the light from outside can drive away the shadows, but being in here, she can do absolutely nothing. Crying desperately, she mentally begs for her older brother to notice her disappearance and come rescue her. Just then, she recalls a childhood secret she never told anyone. Back when she first met Soma, the little girl felt very scared and anxious. Being very young, the girl couldn't quite understand why her parents' friend's son had come to live in their house. The girl tried to be nice in front of everyone, but deep down, she felt like her family and her home were being stolen. Because of this, the little one ended up getting lost one day in a place that became completely dark. Crouched on the ground, crying her eyes out, the little girl truly believed she was going to perish there like that. However, the young boy appeared, holding a lantern and calling for her in the middle of the darkness. The little one confesses that her older brother came looking for her, and that she would never forget that day for the rest of her life. Back in the present, the dark ceiling is violently torn apart by a spear of pure light, catching the monster by surprise. The shadowy creature lets out a bizarre scream of pain as the fairy watches the attack, impressed. With her hope renewed, she shows immense happiness. Taking advantage of the monster being crushed by the icy magic, the little one flies straight up, screaming for her brother. The girl quickly ascends toward the illuminated hole from where the powerful attack was fired. As soon as she reaches the surface, his little sister buries her face in the artisan's chest, who receives her holding his glowing cube. Clinging to the young man, the little fairy breaks down in tears, thanking the heavens for being safe. The artisan keeps his gaze fixed on the dark hole as the creature bubbles down below. Completely furious, the abomination charges at high speed, swearing that the two of them wouldn't get out alive. Without hesitation, the MC readies his new luminous equipment and fires a direct blow at the target. The impact of the light punch hits the spirit with crushing force, illuminating the entire shop. Crouched on the floor with his weapon stuck in the wood, the kid warns that the creature picked the wrong opponent and tells it to get lost. The brilliant energy completely disintegrates the dark monster in an instant. Impressed, the real estate agent claps and praises the young man's ability to discover the enemy's true identity. The MC agrees, explaining that the thing that pulled his little sister looked like a ghost, which immediately raised the main suspicion. The kid details that he only needed to use the light from a solar mirror to force the creature out of the shadows. Right after that, it was just a matter of crushing the beast using the elemental weakness of that new light-focused fist weapon. The artisan brags about the result of his improvised forge. Just then, the agent questions why the entity focused on the little fairy. Soma concludes it was precisely because she managed to see the creature watching them, hidden from a distance behind the counter. The bluish apparition was just a decoy, and the fairy ended up being attacked when she tried to investigate the source of that dangerous gaze. At that exact moment, a real ghost appears, floating right behind the agent and the maid, without anyone noticing. Beginning to fade into particles of light, the true spirit thanks the group for their help and peacefully moves on. Watching the glow disappear, the little fairy puts the pieces together and finally understands what was happening there. Now outside the shop, she deduces that the ghost was of an adventurer killed by the dark monster, who was only seeking revenge. Meanwhile, inside a dark church, a voice echoes indignantly, unable to believe the abomination's defeat. A man slams his fist on the table, freaking out with rage and yelling that the result made no sense at all. Mocking his colleague's frustration, a shadowy figure laughs loudly, stating that he deserved to fail. The hunter Hayato criticizes the plan, finding it too convoluted to hide a beast in a shop, just to try to take out a simple artisan. Completely offended, the mage Ignis retorts that attacking openly on the surface would cause too many unnecessary problems. Interrupting the useless argument, a hooded figure walks down the corridor, praising the strategy of hurting those close to the target. The mysterious person adjusts their hood, maintaining an extremely cold and threatening posture. The hooded leader reveals herself to be a white-haired woman named Diablo and confesses she was disappointed with the mission's failure. Startled by the sudden presence of his master, the wizard starts stammering nervously, trying to justify himself. Ignoring the excuses, the leader calls the two failures by name as their shadows tremble in fear. With a psychopathic look, the woman warns the two not to forget the real reason they were given new powers. Faced with the threat of imminent demise, the villains break into a cold sweat and swear they won't fail the next attempt. The light illuminates the church's stained glass window as the hunter tells the useless mage to back off and stay out of it. The villain demands his colleague watch in silence, as the next assassination attempt would be all his. Transformed into a bizarre bird monster, Hayato leaps, swearing he himself would massacre the darned artisan. A few weeks after that macabre incident with the spirits, the atmosphere in the city calms down again. The team's new shop finally opens its doors and quickly attracts a crowd of loyal customers every day. Focused in his workshop, the MC forges nonstop, turning profits into new materials to keep the wheel spinning. He recalls spending almost all his gold reserves to renovate the entire building, and buy the heavy initial stock. However, the artisan sees that spent fortune merely as a necessary investment to multiply his capital in the future. The success is so great that average daily sales hit 200,000 coins, leaving a huge net profit for the group. Calculating everything on the holographic calculator, the kid animatedly concludes that at this rate, the goal would be met in just 3 months. Thanks to the stabilized financial situation, Soma decides it's time to start accepting custom forge orders again. The young man analyzes the pending requests on the panel and suggests accepting the contract from a certain Mechanical Doll Appreciation Club. The maid moves closer to the screen, her eyes shining, very focused on the job aimed at robots like herself. Breaking into a cold sweat, the little fairy is visibly uncomfortable with the idea and confesses she has a very personal reason for not wanting to go. His little sister shyly explains that the president of this club was an old exploration companion of hers who disappeared a long time ago. Maintaining a nervous smile, the little one asks if the artisan saw any problem with refusing that request. But ignoring her discomfort, he accepts the mission on the spot, making the maid celebrate while the fairy completely freaks out. The next day, the group goes to a bustling city square to meet the mysterious client. Sipping his tea, the kid comments that doll fans are usually pretty weird people and hopes his friend isn't the same. At that moment, a woman wearing a provocative religious outfit approaches, waving in a very scandalous manner. Totally relieved, the fairy breaks into a big smile and greets her old friend by her real name. The cleric is indignant about the name leak, but is soon shocked to confirm that the little blue monster was indeed Shika. Watching the shouting match in the middle of the street, the MC is speechless and asks someone to explain all this craziness. Very excited, the religious woman says she founded the fan club and confesses she was amazed by the robot's performance in the grand duel. The woman begins to analyze every detail of the maid up close, praising the sculpting of her face and the machine's mechanical joints. Thrilled, the cleric focuses solely on talking to the robot about stylish clothes, completely ignoring the artisan's comments. The friendly reunion vibe is in full swing right near the gigantic entrance that led directly to the labyrinth's depths. The group continues to chat casually at the square's table, oblivious to the imminent danger. Suddenly, the kid's eyes widen as he focuses on a point above, feeling a gigantic shadow cover the place. A huge monstrous bird dives from the skies at high speed, preparing a lightning-fast attack against the distracted team. The little fairy completely freaks out, screaming desperately that the lower floors are way too dangerous. Keeping his cool, Soma explains it would be better to wait for the shops to restock materials, but notes that could take years. Curious about her desperation, the robot girl asks if these deeper floors are really that risky. Trembling with fear, his little sister warns that the place is infested with mutant dragons, and only experienced adventurers survive there. However, the MC focuses on the absurd rewards, knowing that the materials from there yield weapons worth millions of coins. The kid admits the danger but reveals he's been down there before with some veteran friends from the game, leaving the fairy completely shocked. Quickly changing the subject, he mentions that these partners practically live down there, and would definitely help if he explained the situation. The artisan acknowledges the risk is extremely high, while the maid asks for permission to accompany him on this dangerous journey. The mechanical girl swears she will do her utmost to protect her master, making the little fairy finally give in. With a firm stance, the robot says she's on his little sister's side too, and he promises not to do anything crazy down there. The system displays a balance of 17 million after the shop's profits, confirming that 83 million are still needed for the big goal. A few days pass, and the small group begins the long descent into the depths. As soon as they get off the elevator, the kid thanks some adventurers for the ride, remembering they didn't have their own shortcut pass. The paladin Oliver assures him it was no trouble at all, as his team was just returning from restocking to train. Then, the knight asks if the little fairy had ever explored the place before, but the artisan denies it, considering it end game content. Understanding her inexperience, the warrior simply tells the girl to prepare for what's to come. His little sister freezes on the spot, not understanding the mysterious tone of that warning. A colossal landscape reveals itself before them, and the MC warns that from here on out, the normal rules simply cease to exist. Utterly perplexed by the bizarre immensity, the little fairy lets out a scream, asking what kind of crazy place this was. She marvels at how the cavern ceiling perfectly mimics an open sky with islands floating over a bottomless abyss. Oliver explains that as they descend, the floors house environments that would be impossible to exist in a normal underground setting. Observing the distance between the chunks of land, the girl questions how anyone without the ability to fly could possibly explore this. The little one remains very tense, trying to find a logical solution for the crossing. Suddenly, a dragon crosses the skies, and Soma praises the perfect timing as an ally fires a rope at the creature. The shooter confirms the action, mounted on the beast, as he controls its path through the sky. Soon after, the MC calls out the name of a girl who appears, flying in control of another giant monster. With great agility, the mage, mounted on a magic broom, rescues a companion in mid-air. The group demonstrates impressive coordination, gliding through the abyss with giant flying feathers. Oliver leaves the crossing in the artisan's hands, who activates his cube, using rare feathers to forge something. An intense glow reveals the quick creation of a wooden boat equipped with technological wings for the group. Sailing on the flying boat, the paladin says he can only take them this far and decides to give one last important warning. The kid is startled to hear that a person named Diablo has started appearing frequently on these deep floors. The maid wants to know what kind of monster that was, but her master immediately corrects her, stating it was a human being. He details that the person is a cruel assassin focused exclusively on hunting and eliminating other explorers out of pure malice. The artisan recalls that just as he was obsessed with forging, that maniac spent his entire days just taking out players. The little fairy confirms the assassin's reputation, while the robot agrees that facing someone like that would be a huge problem. Cursing his luck, the MC grumbles that they already had enough headaches with dwindling ingredients. The kid theorizes that discovering the cause of that bizarre transformation could be an alternative cure without spending a ton of money. Suddenly, a brutal dragon emerges from the clouds, destroying the flying boat with a colossal bite. Plummeting into the void, the fairy despairs at the surprise attack while the machine tells her master to stabilize their fall. The monstrous beast banks in the air, preparing another devastating blow against the falling group. Tense about the situation, the young man says stabilizing wouldn't do any good against the attacks, and that they were going to be splattered on the ground. The remains of the wooden boat collide violently with the rocky ground, kicking up a lot of dust. However, the lethal impact ends up being completely absorbed by an emergency magic barrier conjured just in time. Almost out of breath, his little sister stammers in relief that they escaped their end by a hair's breadth. Before they could celebrate, a thunderous impact shakes the ground right outside the barrier. A colossal golem covered in incandescent flames rises menacingly, tearing another scream of terror from the fairy. Maintaining his cool, the artisan asks for silence as he immediately draws a giant, luminous sword for combat. Hiding behind the rocks, they watch in shock as the fire beast is quickly sliced apart by a relentless blow. As the dust settles, the MC recognizes the warrior on the spot, giving his team a big scare. The muscular barbarian named Ban finds the coincidence amusing, commenting that he saw their bizarre fall from up high. The warrior questions the reason for their visit, remembering that the kid always preferred to be a recluse with his inventions. Cutting the small talk, the MC states that they had their own reasons for being there, leaving the fairy confused. His barbarian friend observes the volcanic destruction around them, deducing that the world on the surface was a real mess. He thinks the fear of scarcity is an exaggeration, arguing that million coin materials aren't things any explorer buys on impulse. Soma counters, explaining that corporations hide fortunes and could exhaust the entire market in the blink of an eye. With that, the kid moves on with the initial plan and activates his creation cube, displaying a large green glow. An imposing red sword is forged on the spot, and the artisan tries to push the sale on his friend, as if it were an act of charity. The warrior turns his head, laughing, not at all surprised by this aggressive sales tactic happening in the middle of such a lethal place. Showing off his own gear, the barbarian refuses the offer, reminding him he only fights with brutal axes and had no interest in that. His friend explains that veterans down here already use legendary equipment, but the young man grumbles that it was still better than selling on the surface. Giving some valuable advice, the barbarian suggests the kid needed some ridiculously eye-catching advertising to attract customers. The little fairy recalls that the other group had gone up precisely to restock the team's basic supplies. The robot agrees with the idea of healing items, pointing out that magic scrolls would certainly sell wonderfully. Weighing the options, the MC concludes that profiting only from supplies wouldn't meet the goal and decides to focus on aggressive advertising. Shocking everyone, the artisan firmly announces that he himself would go to the front lines to hunt the local monsters. Desperate, his little sister pulls on his clothes, wanting to cancel the plan, but the young man assures her it was the only viable way out. He reminds them that all the explosive sales they've had so far happened precisely after they demonstrated the weapon's power in practice. The barbarian tries to stop him, but the kid argues that marketing only works if a weak guy like him overcomes the brutal challenges. Accepting his friend's stubbornness, the big warrior offers heavy-duty help to gather the necessary raw materials to forge the pieces. With the decision made, a small portable stall is magically set up in the middle of that dangerous wasteland. The artisan makes his powerful cube shine with a big smile and declares that his special little extermination shop was open for business. On the very first day of operations, a monstrous, high-level giant plant appears, drooling poison in the area. The adventurers panic at the beast's lethal perfume, knowing it mixed all the worst possible status effects. Hiding behind the rocks, the group debates whether they should retreat to the surface or try to push through despite that bizarre gas. The little fairy completely freaks out, screaming desperately that the lower floors are way too dangerous. Keeping his cool, Soma explains it would be better to wait for the shops to restock materials, but notes that could take years. Curious about her desperation, the robot girl asks if these deeper floors are really that risky. Trembling with fear, his little sister warns that the place is infested with mutant dragons, and only experienced adventurers survive there. However, the MC focuses on the absurd rewards, knowing that the materials from there yield weapons worth millions of coins. The kid admits the danger but reveals he's been down there before with some veteran friends from the game, leaving the fairy completely shocked. Quickly changing the subject, he mentions that these partners practically live down there and would definitely help if he explained the situation. The artisan acknowledges the risk is extremely high, while the maid asks for permission to accompany him on this dangerous journey. The mechanical girl swears she will do her utmost to protect her master, making the little fairy finally give in. With a firm stance, the robot says she's on his little sister's side too, and he promises not to do anything crazy down there. The system displays a balance of 17 million after the shop's profits, confirming that 83 million are still needed for the big goal. A few days pass, and the small group begins the long descent into the depths. As soon as they get off the elevator, the kid thanks some adventurers for the ride. Remembering they didn't have their own shortcut pass, the paladin Oliver assures him it was no trouble at all, as his team was just returning from restocking to train. Then, the knight asks if the little fairy had ever explored the place before, but the artisan denies it, considering it game content. Understanding her inexperience, the warrior simply tells the girl to prepare for what's to come. His little sister freezes on the spot, not understanding the mysterious tone of that warning. A colossal landscape reveals itself before them, and the MC warns that from here on out, the normal rules simply cease to exist. Utterly perplexed by the bizarre immensity, the little fairy lets out a scream, asking what kind of crazy place this was. She marvels at how the cavern ceiling perfectly mimics an open sky with islands floating over a bottomless abyss. Oliver explains that as they descend, the floors house environments that would be impossible to exist in a normal underground setting. Observing the distance between the chunks of land, the girl questions how anyone without the ability to fly could possibly explore this. The little one remains very tense, trying to find a logical solution for the crossing. Suddenly, a dragon crosses the skies, and Soma praises the perfect timing as an ally fires a rope at the creature. The shooter confirms the action, mounted on the beast, as he controls its path through the sky. Soon after, the MC calls out the name of a girl who appears, flying in control of another giant monster. With great agility, the mage mounted on a magic broom rescues a companion in mid-air. The group demonstrates impressive coordination, gliding through the abyss with giant flying feathers. Oliver leaves the crossing in the artisan's hands, who activates his cube, using rare feathers to forge something. An intense glow reveals the quick creation of a wooden boat, equipped with technological wings for the group. Sailing on the flying boat, the paladin says he can only take them this far and decides to give one last important warning. The kid is startled to hear that a person named Diablo has started appearing frequently on these deep floors. The maid wants to know what kind of monster that was, but her master immediately corrects her, stating it was a human being. He details that the person is a cruel assassin focused exclusively on hunting and eliminating other explorers out of pure malice. The artisan recalls that just as he was obsessed with forging, that maniac spent his entire days just taking out players. The little fairy confirms the assassin's reputation, while the robot agrees that facing someone like that would be a huge problem. Cursing his luck, the MC grumbles that they already had enough headaches with dwindling ingredients. The kid theorizes that discovering the cause of that bizarre transformation could be an alternative cure without spending a ton of money. Suddenly, a brutal dragon emerges from the clouds, destroying the flying boat with a colossal bite. Plummeting into the void, the fairy despairs at the surprise attack while the machine tells her master to stabilize their fall. The monstrous beast banks in the air, preparing another devastating blow against the falling group. Tense about the situation, the young man says stabilizing wouldn't do any good against the attacks, and that they were going to be splattered on the ground. The remains of the wooden boat collide violently with the rocky ground, kicking up a lot of dust. However, the lethal impact ends up being completely absorbed by an emergency magic barrier conjured just in time. Almost out of breath, his little sister stammers in relief that they escaped their end by a hair's breadth. Before they could celebrate, a thunderous impact shakes the ground, right outside the barrier. A colossal golem covered in incandescent flames rises menacingly, tearing another scream of terror from the fairy. Maintaining his cool, the artisan asks for silence as he immediately draws a giant, luminous sword for combat. Hiding behind the rocks, they watch in shock as the fire beast is quickly sliced apart by a relentless blow. As the dust settles, the MC recognizes the warrior on the spot, giving his team a big scare. The muscular barbarian named Ban finds the coincidence amusing, commenting that he saw their bizarre fall from up high. The warrior questions the reason for their visit, remembering that the kid always preferred to be a recluse with his inventions. Cutting the small talk, the MC states that they had their own reasons for being there, leaving the fairy confused. His barbarian friend observes the volcanic destruction around them, deducing that the world on the surface was a real mess. He thinks the fear of scarcity is an exaggeration, arguing that million coin materials aren't things any explorer buys on impulse. Soma counters, explaining that corporations hide fortunes and could exhaust the entire market in the blink of an eye. With that, the kid moves on with the initial plan and activates his creation cube, displaying a large green glow. An imposing red sword is forged on the spot, and the artisan tries to push the sale on his friend as if it were an act of charity. The warrior turns his head, laughing, not at all surprised by this aggressive sales tactic happening in the middle of such a lethal place. Showing off his own gear, the barbarian refuses the offer, reminding him he only fights with brutal axes and had no interest in that. His friend explains that veterans down here already use legendary equipment, but the young man grumbles that it was still better than selling on the surface. Giving some valuable advice, the barbarian suggests the kid needed some ridiculously eye-catching advertising to attract customers. The little fairy recalls that the other group had gone up precisely to restock the team's basic supplies. The robot agrees with the idea of healing items, pointing out that magic scrolls would certainly sell wonderfully. Weighing the options, the MC concludes that profiting only from supplies wouldn't meet the goal and decides to focus on aggressive advertising. Shocking everyone, the artisan firmly announces that he himself would go to the front lines to hunt the local monsters. Desperate, his little sister pulls on his clothes, wanting to cancel the plan, but the young man assures her it was the only viable way out. He reminds them that all the explosive sales they've had so far happened precisely after they demonstrated the weapon's power in practice. The barbarian tries to stop him, but the kid argues that marketing only works if a weak guy like him overcomes the brutal challenges. Accepting his friend's stubbornness, the big warrior offers heavy-duty help to gather the necessary raw materials to forge the pieces. With the decision made, a small portable stall is magically set up in the middle of that dangerous wasteland. The artisan makes his powerful cube shine with a big smile and declares that his special little extermination shop was open for business. On the very first day of operations, a monstrous, high-level giant plant appears, drooling poison in the area. The adventurers panic at the beast's lethal perfume, knowing it mixed all the worst possible status effects. Hiding behind the rocks, the group debates whether they should retreat to the surface or try to push through despite that bizarre gas. Exploring the ruins of that abandoned city, Soma calmly asks the little fairy if she's had any luck in her search. Walking beside the maid, the kid comments that the item should be around here. The robot agrees that a rarity like that wouldn't show up so easily, but the MC focuses on the absurd profit, remembering that forging something with that golden skull would easily bring in over 3 million coins. Satisfied with the progress of the exploration so far, the artisan suggests that this would be a great time for them to take a break. However, the tranquility ends in the blink of an eye when a giant, sharp feather comes tearing through the air, right in front of the kid's face. A true shower of these projectiles plummets from the sky with tremendous violence, embedding themselves in the ground and kicking up a lot of dust around the duo. With the explosive impact, dense dust fills the scene while the bizarre arrows remain stuck in the rocks. Protected by a magic barrier, the young man sighs in frustration and immediately takes back what he said about things going perfectly well. Just then, the sound of gigantic wings beating hard echoes through the area, accompanied by a scandalous and mocking laugh. The hunter Hayato appears, transformed into that bizarre bird monster, and arrogantly asks if the artisan missed him. The villain wastes no time and already prepares another of his deadly luminous projectiles to attack again. Drawing his bowstring, the big guy says he heard some interesting rumors, and that thanks to them, it was very easy to track the group down here. In an aggressive dive, the winged beast fires its shot and swears that this time there would be no second chances, as he would take the kid out no matter what. A relentless blast of lethal energy tears down through the air, straight toward the MC. Maintaining total composure, Soma summons his magic to his arm and grumbles that this guy was a really persistent pain in the neck. The magic cube shines intensely in the kid's hands, quickly forging a technological shield focused on the wind element. The equipment creates a violent tornado that sucks in and deflects all the arrows, leaving the winged hunter completely shocked by the impenetrable defense. A hooded figure appears right behind the monster, calling his attitude pathetic and telling the big guy to back off. The artisan recognizes the voice immediately as the dark cloak slips off the newcomer's body. The wizard Ignis reveals himself, transformed into a high-class spirit, sporting a bizarre appearance full of pulsating purple magic. Exuding hatred, the mage guarantees he hasn't forgotten the last humiliation and demands the kid beg for mercy to receive a quick end. Hearing that whole speech, the bird hunter gets confused and mocks his colleague for inventing a scary name for himself. Annoyed by the interruption, the evil spirit fires a blast of purple energy at his own ally, catching the big guy by surprise. With a sadistic smile, the wizard warns not to confuse him with the trash he used to be, as this was his new power after abandoning humanity. 4 gigantic magic circles shine in the air around the villain, activating an incredibly powerful spirit summoning. Confident, Ignis challenges the MC to try to withstand the attack of those elemental spirits, amplified by his advanced magic. The 4 elemental creatures dive furiously from the sky toward the group, leaving a trail of luminous destruction in their wake. The first to charge with everything is the fiery flame beast, ready to incinerate anything in its path. Right behind, the wind entity cuts through the air at an absurd speed, preparing a swift strike. Not to be left behind, the water spirit floats gracefully, preparing a deadly torrent. Closing the formation, the heavy earth creature approaches with brute force to crush its targets. Maintaining absolute calm, the kid summons 4 different energy shields, managing to neutralize the impact of all basic elements at once. Observing the perfect defense, the corrupted mage smiles excitedly and says that this challenge only made his revenge even sweeter. But the villain soon plays dirty, summoning 6 more different magic circles and sending the rest of his elemental servants to attack mercilessly. The luminous fury reveals itself in the form of a brilliant entity that blinds everything around it. Tearing across the battlefield, the lightning spirit exudes a lethal and noisy electricity. The nature creature appears with its magical roots, ready to imprison anyone. And from the back, the macabre shadow of a familiar face advances, emanating a completely sinister aura. The little fairy panics on the spot, recognizing the dark apparition from the incident at the abandoned shop. The artisan immediately puts the pieces together, concluding that the entire trap with the ghost in the past was the work of that wizard. Swinging a large bluish blade, the kid cuts through the enemy attacks while grumbling furiously that they dared to target his little sister. With impressive agility, the MC deflects the magical barrage using his new ice weapon to protect the team from the imminent danger. Ignis gives that same sadistic smile. The kid, in turn, states that he'd love to know what turned the duo into these bizarre monsters. However, noticing the aggressive dive of the giant bird, Soma says the priority now was just to slice the enemies in half. Preparing his blade for a devastating spinning cut, the artisan decrees that they would talk only if the villains survived the blow. Sensing the danger, the cowardly big guy flaps his wings to flee, screaming that he was out of there, leaving the mage furious at the abandonment. Without wasting time on the one fleeing, the artisan hands over the responsibility of taking down the cowardly bird to the robot girl. The little maid obeys immediately, extending her arm with a serious expression as a strong light begins to accumulate. A huge, attached lightning weapon appears on the girl's mechanical arm, ready to pulverize any target at a distance. The technological targeting system locks perfectly on the fleeing hunter high up in the sky. Without showing any mercy, the machine fires a concentrated beam with brutal force. At the same time, the kid spins his lethal blade to clear the battlefield in front of him. A destructive wave of light and ice sweeps over the wizard and his spirits, while the lightning strikes the bird dead, on up above in a colossal explosion. The mage's evil spirit agonizes, feeling its own body disintegrate from the overwhelming impact of that counterattack. The winged big guy also suffers horribly, screaming as the absurd voltage burns his feathers in mid-air. The flash blinds the entire area for a second, resulting in the pathetic fall of the 2 villains, completely carbonized and defeated. Walking calmly through the destroyed scenery, the MC is surprised to see they survived and praises the duo's resilience. The 2 mercenaries drag themselves across the dirty ground without the slightest strength to attempt any kind of reaction. The artisan presses them, demanding to know how they got that power, but the little fairy points upwards, screaming desperately. The kid looks back immediately, noticing a huge dark rift tearing through reality right above their heads. A voice echoes from within the purple portal, admitting they didn't expect to win, but that the difference in strength made it clear they chose the wrong target. With an extremely serious and cautious look, the MC focuses on the person emerging from the shadows and already deduces who was behind it all. The infamous player killer known as Diablo finally steps out of the darkness, displaying a terrifying smile and overflowing with lethal